versus movie. Movie versus movie. Movie versus movie. Movie versus movie.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Movie versus Movie, the podcast that says, what if you compared two movies? We are here. Patrick and I are here. Patrick, give the people some of what they crave.
What's up? How's it going, everybody?
And today we have an amazing show. But before we get to that, I wanted to just say, if you like Movie versus Movie, you want us to keep going, you just want to give your 2 cents, head down to the review place and give us 5 stars. Give us a little love there. We would love to see those reviews. In fact, I'll just read them out on the podcast if people do. If that's what you're into. Anyway, let's get back to this amazing episode. We decided, Patrick and I, a little while ago, we want to do some coming of age movies. And, well, you've heard about her before on the podcast, but we have a guest who immediately offered 2 up. And so we brought her on to help us through them. Why don't we introduce ourselves, our lovely guest?
Hello. It is Jamie coming at you on the pod. Finally here to defend how much I love Dune and that it is one of the best movies of all time.
It's not the movie we're talking about today.
To be clear,
sure it will come up a lot.
You know, the coming of age movie, as you come into age into a god emperor.
I could make a case that Dune is a coming of age movie, but that's another podcast. Okay, so I know you guys know me a little bit, but I figured the best way to get to know me is for me to give you my top 10 favorite movies. And this list is ever changing. So this is as of this date that this podcast is released. You can hold me to this list. But let's go. Let's do it. Dune on there, of course.
Dune.
Of course.
Specifically,
Dune Part 2, please.
Dune Part 2. Come on, don't give me some of
Dune
that Part 1 stuff, huh?
Part 1's great. Part 1 walked so Dune 2 could sprint. And I'll die on that hill. Second favorite movie, if not maybe my first favorite movie, it's been a fighting war between Dune and Mad Max Fury Road. When Mad Max is a perfect movie.
she loves sand.
She loves
I
sand.
love
Man, I've always said
sand.
that about you, that you're just like so into sand.
Yeah, big into anything desert related. Then we got Ladybird, which is kind of a spoiler for how much I love that movie coming now, but you'll learn in the next 6 hours that this podcast will probably take, if it was my way, just how much I love Ladybird. Then we got Interstellar, Parasite, Bones and All. Bones and All is a perfect movie as well. Please go watch it.
That's the cannibal one, right?
Yes, and it's so... I literally held a fake gun to Patrick's head and made him watch this movie. And
Patrick,
he loved it
what was
too.
your-
Patrick, what did you think?
Thumbs up?
Yeah, it was very good. It's pretty gnarly.
It's intense.
It's intense, but really good.
I feel like it's intense, and yes, it's a cannibal movie, but also it didn't feel like super gory or anything like there was definitely gory moments, but it felt justified to me.
Felt justified, but it is. I would say it's pretty gory.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. Whatever.
It is. I think it's a love story though. It's not a horror movie in that sense.
Yes, no jump scares.
Yeah.
Moving on. Inglourious Bastards. Perfect.
I've been watching a lot of YouTube. I've been watching a lot of YouTube shorts on Inglourious Bastards. I've been finding for whatever reason, my algorithm just like pops out movies that it thinks that I'll like. And most of the time it's true. Like these are movies that I love, but I'll watch like 30-second chunks at a time, but the algorithm will just keep feeding me the next one. And so I've watched probably over the last few weeks almost all of Inglourious Bastards and almost all of Django Unchained because
YouTube Shorts?
on YouTube
That's
Shorts.
insane. That's wild behavior.
It's just like me. I'm mindlessly scrolling. I'm like, oh yeah, it's a good movie. Oh, I want to see the next part. What happens after this? And I just click the next one.
God. I love that, Nick. That's very me coded, actually. Okay, we got Arrival, Little Miss Sunshine.
Could be a future.
Yeah, maybe a future guest. We're thinking about.
Also, Patrick, in the last episode when you talked about Little Miss Sunshine, you didn't say that I'm the person that made you watch it.
I'm sorry.
Kind of upset.
Jamie is the puppet master behind us the whole time. So why don't we talk about today's episode a little bit? We have the central theme that we're bringing these movies to cage match each other in is coming of age. And we have a very binary spectrum. We have a woman and her mother sort of thing with Ladybird. And then we have a son, which I think the actor is actually non-binary now. And I would say that probably Linklater would say that like this, it's Boyhood, but like as you grow up and change your identity, I think it addresses that in the movie as well. So they are great in that movie, and it is sort of about them and their father and mother as well, both of them growing up, and we kind of follow them through a transitional moment in their lives. We're going to start with Ladybird because Jamie has a gun up to my head right now, and she will pull the trigger.
Fake gun.
Fake gun.
She has a license. But yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about Ladybird. And Jamie, you have volunteered very kindly to lead us through the plot of Ladybird. We'll stop down as is normal at certain parts to kind of talk about it. But before we get into sort of the plot of this movie, what are our general like thoughts going into it? I mean, this is actually the first time I had seen that movie because when
Crazy to me.
I know, right?
Crazy to me.
I because I love coming of age movies. They're kind of my bread and butter. I had skipped both of these movies when they came out because I was sort of like, I know exactly what these movies are going to be, and I could, in my mind, could be like, I know what I'm going to watch. When I watched them, I was like, these are completely different than I thought that they would be.
Yeah, I'm curious what you expected because you said that about both.
Right.
Especially Ladybird. I want to hear what you were thinking going in.
Yeah, I think that both of them are more whimsical than I thought. Like they both are sort of zany in a fun way. Like they have moments where you're just like, whoa, that's just kind of wild. Like the part and not to say they aren't realistic, like the part, and we'll talk about it a little bit, where she's with her mom and they're just like fighting with each other, and then she's like, "Oh, I love this dress." Stuff like that is just
tone shift.
It's so good. And
mother-daughter relationships. I feel like that scene is such a perfect example of that. I'm just like how fast it can turn on its head.
I thought that both of these movies, I guess, were going to be a lot more dour than they were, and a little bit more kind of like pedantic, like this is my experience growing up, and like think about how deep I am as a teenager. And it really doesn't do that. It's just sort of, both of these movies to me are just like really wonderful snapshots in time. And much like one of my favorite movies, Jamie, Grand Budapest Hotel, which we were talking about earlier today.
Literally watched it last night for those that care.
Yeah, it shows these moments in time, but then it doesn't say like, and this is the entire story. It's just like, we've given you a glimpse into this moment, and now they are going to continue on without you, which I really love as a form anyway. Same. What about you guys? When you guys were seeing this movie for the first time, or when you wanted to rewatch for this episode, what was your kind of thoughts going in?
I had seen Ladybird once around when it came out and loved it, and then hadn't watched it since then. And so watching it again was really great because I had forgotten plot points, so like it felt like kind of watching it for the first time to some extent. I think the thing kind of similar to what you were saying that I forgot is how I remember that Ladybird was really funny, but that it's so
like, funny.
It's like it's a comedy.
Yeah.
And thinking about after Barbie, because like Barbie itself is like a broad comedy. And when we talked about it, I was like, yeah, Greta Gerwig's like a great comedy writer. I feel like I was kind of saying it as like, wow, Greta Gerwig's a great comedy writer. But I'm like, obviously she's a great comedy writer because like Ladybird, our debut, is like, it's so funny. I think it's one of the like, And
that's, I think, why it caught me off guard a little bit, because I thought it was going to be so, like, have you ever seen Captain Fantastic?
Oh, yes, but many years ago.
I love that movie. I thought it was going to be more like that movie, if that makes sense.
It's fair.
Yeah.
First time I ever watched Ladybird was such a beautiful experience. And I don't even say that jokingly. I was living in North Carolina at the time, and I went to my favorite movie, like art house movie theater.
Shout it out.
Grail Movie House, my favorite movie house in the world. But yeah, I remember I saw it, and they have couches in there, so I was like snuggled on a couch, and I think the movie like just had so many moments where I felt so this related to my life, and I think I like lost my mind when they started playing Dave Matthews Band, and that became such a big plot point in the movie because
you're
one
a
thing you should know about me
huge-
is I'm a huge DMB
You
fan.
love David.
Me and Dave go back. Yeah, I've probably seen DMB like over 20 times. So I think that there's a lot to be said there for just me being like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And I remember crying in the theater because I just felt, and I don't cry a lot in theaters, just because I'm anxious, but I straight up cried because it felt like I was the only person in the theater, and I felt like I was being personally addressed. And I think that speaks to Greta, both like her writing and just like how it was shot. It was, I wish I could relive that day.
Yeah. Well, then why don't we dive in? I think that for Boyhood, and we'll come back to Boyhood in the second half as we kind of go through our experience watching that one as well. Boyhood is, I think, also definitely within the coming of age kind of genre, but both of these directors I feel like are kind of obsessed with things that are not the aging process, but more of like a specific thing. Like Linklater's obviously obsessed with time. A lot of his movies are obsessed with time. This movie, I feel like she's really like, she's obsessed with like the communication or the lack of communication or the inability to communicate with a specific person. And I kind of feel like that's also in some of her other movies like Barbie and things like that, where you have a gap in being able to express your feelings to each other, like with Ken and Barbie and the rest of the movie. But why don't we just really dive into Lady Bird? Let's start at the beginning. Jamie, take it away.
Okay, so the movie opens with a college visit happening somewhere in California. They don't really specify where. And it kind of opens the movie with Marion, Lady Bird's mom, and her sharing a room. You can tell that they're family, they're related. And then it kind of cuts to them. You kind of get actually a feel for how particular her mom is just in that first scene when she makes the bed, even though it's a hotel room that they're leaving, and Lady Bird's kind of like, why? They're just gonna make it anyway. And her mom is just like, I just want things to be nice. And I think that just sets the tone perfectly going into the next scene when they're in the car together, which also sets our time period. It's 2002. It's fall of 2002. And the whole movie takes place over 1 year.
And it's her final year of high school.
She's a senior at Immaculate Heart, and that's in Sacramento. And I think it's worthwhile mentioning that this movie is basically like a love letter to Sacramento, which is where Greta grew up. So it's like semi-autobiographical.
Is it line up with her when she would have been in senior in high school?
That I don't know, but she does say that... and I have like a...
Yeah, I looked it up, and it was basically her saying like, this is like I directly pulled from my life. I think I also looked up that she went to high school a little earlier. Like this is not an exact 1-to-1.
It's pretty close. She was born in 83. Honestly, that would have made her 18 in 2001. So maybe she was like, I'll just move it a year so I don't have to deal with
the two towers.
Valid.
Man, it all comes back to 9/11.
And I think it adds more
be a podcast
setting similar to Boyhood, setting it during like the Iraq War. I feel like that's a specific time in people's
Also,
memory.
both of these movies do an incredible, I think Boyhood better than and Lady Bird, because I don't think it, but again, Lady Bird does a lot of things that really place you in a specific moment.
Yeah.
Both of these movies, I was like, holy shit, like what a nostalgia. Like we'll get to it, but at the final scene of this movie where she's at like her first college party and she has like the cups and everything, I was like, oh my God.
Or even the CDs.
Yeah, the
going through
CDs.
But I think Greta also said, nothing in the movie literally happened in my life, but it has a core of truth that resonates with what I know. So I think she definitely pulls from her life, but maybe not in the most direct way, which honestly is probably the most ideal.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're in the car and they're driving back home and they're finishing the Grapes of Wrath on tape, which great. And they're both weeping.
Yeah.
Amazing. And then it kind of shifts to them trying to figure out what to do next. And Marion's like, let's just sit with what we just heard. And Lady Bird wants to play music. And I think it's just the perfect segue into like them getting into a fight, which ends up with Lady Bird jumping out the car.
That is the first scene where I was like, this is not the movie I thought it was. Because it's, and this is what I mean by zany fun kind of stuff. Literally in high school, I did jump out of somebody's car. You both know Mitch, my friend.
Yes.
So, and Mitch has been on the podcast before a while ago for our Josie and the Pussycats versus Camp Rock episode.
Nice.
But Mitch is goes way back with me, and we were literally the first night that like we had actually like started talking at a party, and we're like, oh, we're gonna be friends. Like we're gonna be friends. Or they were giving me a ride, and they were like, oh man, like that party, like those people are kind of boring. Like I wish something exciting would happen happen to me right now. And I was like, oh yeah. And I opened the door and I jumped out of the car.
Nick.
And
I
they
would
got
never
really
expect that from you.
They got really. I was in high school. I would run after my friends' cars and jump on top of them as they were trying to drive out of the school lot. Like
This
I
is
was
why you love Fast
nutter.
and Furious.
Yeah, I was nuts. I was
Trying to
Vin
live that.
Diesel / Paul Walker.
You're living that in Maine.
And now I'm just slowly becoming ludicrous, and that's fine.
I love
I
another
haven't
thing that
seen enough of
people.
those movies to know exactly what that means.
I want everyone on the podcast to know that I also love Ludacris.
But yeah, like that moment, I was like, this is so like. I thought it was going to take itself so seriously. And like when they started fighting and everything, I was like, this is the movie I thought it was. And,
Yeah.
and then she jumps out of the car and I was like, oh, okay, never mind.
Oh, so good. Oh, just so good. I think that just is the perfect, because after that you get the title card for the movie. And then you get like the amazing music that's in this movie. And then we kind of flash forward to her being at school, so Immaculate Heart. And that's where we also meet a bunch of other characters like Julie, her best friend, played by Bernie, Feldstein?
Yeah, yep.
Feldstein. Who's great in this movie. I actually...
Beanie, not Bernie.
Thank you.
Yeah. I was like, something about that was
Yeah,
wrong,
I
but I
felt
don't know what it
like
was.
Right. Is this her debut?
I don't know.
This is the thing that got her, because it was like this and then into Booksmart, and those two really launched her.
Which also a famously coming age movie.
God, I love that movie too.
Very good movie.
Also, speaking of the soundtrack, it's John Brion who did Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Fuck yeah.
Also covered on this.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Thank you, Patrick.
Movie versus movie continuity.
Yeah,
We love.
it's all connected.
We're creating a world. Yes. So then we kind of meet her at school. And I think we get introduced to what she does at school, like her theater program. And that's when Ladybird starts dating Danny. So it's also should be noted that although this is the Catholic school, there's a girls' school and then there's a boys' school. So they work together and do things together, like the school prom and things like that. So being mindful that she's mostly in an all-girls school, but there is a school adjacent that's male, and that's how she meets all male characters in this movie.
Which is also like kind of crazy to me, because growing up in Maine, in like a rural area, we didn't really have like gender divided schools, unless I guess it's a private school, maybe. I'm not really sure, but like that was just kind of a wild thing for me to be like, oh, they don't
It was
have...
a private school.
It's definitely a private.
Yeah, it was a private
Because
school. I'm just
her
saying
brother almost got shot at Sac High.
You're saying,
yeah,
first step.
for me, I just was like so
Right.
unfamiliar with that concept, and seeing how that actually plays out in sort of like a teenage year thing was pretty interesting.
yeah.
And is Dave Timotei?
Huh? Danny.
Danny?
Yeah, it's Lucas Hedges.
Yeah,
Lucas
Lucas Hedges.
Okay, great.
Who does an amazing job.
Yeah.
And was the second person cast in this movie. Just so we're aware.
You might be hearing some rustling. That is Jamie flipping through her actual script of
that
Ladybird that she has earmarked.
ASMR portion of the podcast.
You guys, I'm crazy.
But I feel like this movie too is culturally significant, because this was like also kind of the emergence of, I feel like, three big stars. I guess Saoirse Ronan had been in a decent amount of stuff.
Little
But you
Women, right? Or is that after?
That's after this.
Yeah.
After.
But you like Lucas Hedges and Timothy Chalamet is the two. Like, I feel like they were on really parallel tracks during this time and like after this, even to the point where they like, I feel like after this both did a like drug addicted teen movie.
Yeah.
It was like what, Beautiful Boy and
Oh yeah.
Ben's not something.
Boy
Ben.
Erased.
Boy Erased, maybe.
Something like that.
But I love both of them as actors. I'm kind of sad not to see, because Lucas Hedges was in Manchester by the Sea too. I'm sad that I feel like he has
fallen off a little
He
bit.
kind of seems like he apexed more in the like teen performer realm, whereas like obviously Timothy's trajectory has been like exponential since this.
Yeah.
But I think he's very good in this movie.
We talked a little bit about it off mic, and we can talk about it maybe in like the Culture Boys podcast later this month. But like, I actually don't like Timothy Chalamet as an actor. I don't know what it is. It's also like, I looked him up once during the pandemic when I was
just
like,
brought my gun back out.
when I was like, man, this guy is in everything. How old is he? And I was like, oh, he's younger than me. Oh, that's frustrating. And then I was like, oh, what's his background? And his dad's like a UN person, and his mom is like a really high-powered lawyer or whatever. And he's been essentially like famous since he was 14. And I was like, that motherfucker.
He had an custom Xbox controller YouTube channel.
Yes, he did.
But I think that's part of his charm, though. You can tell he's a rich, like, it's obvious. You look at his face and you're like, yeah, you haven't wanted for anything in your life ever.
Which is fun because like in a lot of the more recent movies he's been in, he is presented to us as sort of like this hero or like an everyman or whatever, and I never
Or Messiah.
Well, that's
right, yeah.
and I never buy it, but in this movie when we see him, I was like, oh, this is perfect.
Nick, I know you loved his hand-rolled cigarettes.
Destined.
So good,
He's so good. Yeah, but like Dune, I feel like something like Dune he's perfect for, because that is the characters.
He's kind of like ethereal.
Yeah, but like Wonka, like it doesn't really work. And
Please don't say the word Wonka in front of me.
sorry, we're getting ahead of ourselves on the
We gotta do
Timothy
Wonka
talk.
someday.
Did you watch Wonka?
Do not invite me
I
back
haven't.
for the
It's not
Wonka
good.
podcast.
It's not even like so bad. It's good. Like
It's just pretty bad.
people liked it.
It's
People
cringe
liked
to
it.
me.
People gave it good reviews.
It did like really good in the box office too, and
It did
like
pretty well.
my
It made
parents who
money.
are famously not very like, I would say, culturally savvy.
they're
Like they're not in the indie scene, but they were like, "We're gonna go see Wonka."
Wonka.
We went to see one of those movies, Wonka, I think it was, and I was like, "Oh my god!"
I think it was a decent hit. It was the Paddington guy, and it had an iota of the Paddington charm.
Yeah.
But
Listen,
it's-
I will defend the Paddington series to the day I die. It's
Same.
so fucking good, and I will give that director enough grace to watch Wonka if we ever do it. But like, yeah, I think it's exactly what you were saying, where it's just like not. It doesn't seem like it was made.
It's giving George Miller makes Babe and then
Yeah.
makes Mad Max.
But actually,
Babe is good.
Babe is so good. Babe 2, in
But it
fact,
just, like-
was Roger Ebert's best movie of the year, 1997.
Wow.
I
or
didn't say
something.
it was bad. I'm just saying like a shift
Yeah.
Yeah.
in tone.
Very true.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, we're slowly going through this movie. So we're driving.
I think another thing to note about Immaculate Heart is there are multiple points in the movie when Ladybird meets with her counselor, which at sometimes is this one woman, but other times one of the nuns. And I think you kind of find out pretty early on that Ladybird doesn't have like amazing grades. Like
Yeah.
she's not dumb by any stretch, but I think there's just points even when she gets rid of the teacher's grading book, which was such a crazy move. That she's not like I think she's like just like an average student, not a standout student, and I think she wants to go to schools where you have to be a standout student. So that kind of lingers throughout the whole movie because you're basically watching her trying to get into college, specifically far away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sacramento.
And I think it like speaks to this feeling too of that age of like, yeah, especially going through the applying to college process where they really like, you have to be remarkable, one of a kind, perfect. And just like this desire, I think the combination of like feeling things so strongly that you can't express, and also this desire to be like someone important who does important things, in this movie and in Boyhood, I think this comes out, that feeling of being a teenager and just like, also just like being a teenager and having no idea what you want to do with your life. I love like in the movie throughout the course of the year, like she changes a lot just in this 1 year of high school.
Definitely.
The people she hangs out with and stuff in this effort to like try to feel important.
Yeah, I love what you were just saying too about feeling something so intensely that you can't express it. I think that feels like, to me, one of the central theses of this film, because it's not just her. Like, she's a teenager. Of course, we kind of expect a little bit of that from teenagers and teenage characters, but we also get a lot of that from the mom as well. Like, the mom very much feels things very deeply and is maybe one of the causes of a lot of the conflict between them, but also like I think that Greta does a lot of grace to that character by also showing the mom dealing with her own like lack of ability to communicate her feelings in a way
which is
that,
mediated by her father, who is such a different, like you can tell Ladybird takes so much after her mom just by like, and I think also why she loves her father so much, and also why Marion, you know, married her dad. I think it's like a balancing of personalities.
And I think you also get like a contrast too of the idea of like feeling something deeply and you can't express it, of like between the father being depressed, the priest character being depressed, and I think Julie kind of at the end talks about, like, I feel like you kind of get that contrast too. I think it's a similar thing of like, but obviously a different kind of emotional state of like, these are also people who can't express how they feel in a meaningful way,
and they can't really deal with their emotions either. Like
I think it's also worth noting that they might not even have the resources to do so.
Totally.
I think like her dad, you find out later that at one point her dad becomes unemployed. Her mom is a nurse that works what feels like long hours at times and isn't around all the time. And when she is, she's a force of a presence. And I think that also speaks to like where they are economically of, you know, they're not living in the fabulous 40s that they mention in the movie where that's the nice area. They're on the quote wrong side of the tracks, which Ladybird says to Danny at one point. And I think that definitely plays a huge part in everything she does, whether it's talking to her friends or, you know, what she buys and what she wears, and like going thrifting all the time. And I think money is a thing that is a huge factor in this movie to how her experience is. And even just like how she's applying to college, she has to ask her dad to fill out like financial aid forms, and that's like a big ask. So I think there's a lot of factors that also include her status and how they are like a poorer family in general.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on.
Also, her dad, you should say her parents played by
Laurie Metcalf.
Laurie Metcalf and Tracy Letts is her dad. Both incredible.
Laurie Metcalf is so good in this
Are they
movie.
both?
She got nominated for Oscar, so did Saoirse.
Are they
deservingly?
Yes. Are they both Laurie Metcalf? And I know Tracy Letts is a Chicago Steppenwolf theater guy. Is Laurie Metcalf a Chicago theater?
I don't know.
She might be.
Give it a googs.
But yeah, I think they're both. Yeah, she is Steppenwolf theater. It's like a kind of experimental theater that
It's
produced a lot
basically
of
just
big,
like, it's not so much experimental. It's just very much like the cutting edge professional theater in Chicago, without being commercial. So it's like a Steppenwolf production. I would say is like much more like an indie movie than a blockbuster. You know what I mean? Like a critical darling.
like an A24.
Yes,
so to say.
exactly.
And it's produced a lot of like famous, like character actor types, right? Like Willem Dafoe, Michael Shannon,
Stephen Colbert, actually, I think came out of Steppenwolf and Second City.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. So she meets her.
So we're at school.
Yes.
We meet Julie, who's her best friend. And we kind of get a glimpse into like how Ladybird needs to step up her college application, and so she's going to get into theater, which just leads to the most amazing montage of Sondheim people auditioning with Sondheim music.
Oh my God.
Just honestly,
so
chef's
good.
kiss. There's just so many good ones. So she auditions. She has an amazing outfit, amazing audition dress. Thank you. Shout out to the wardrobe department. But then we find out that Julie got cast in the lead. Danny's going to also be in the play. That's how we get introduced to Danny. And Julie has the most heartbreaking line I've ever heard. When they talk about how she's going to be able to get to kiss Danny, and Julie's like, well, that's maybe the only time I'll ever get to do that. Crying in the club. That line crushed my soul.
And Ladybird kind of just writes it off. Like, she's not the best friend to Julie. It's clear, obviously, by the end, she's a good friend, and it's clear they love each other. And I think it's interesting. Like, it's obviously implied they've been best friends for a long time. And I do think it's interesting when you see like Julie's apartment at the end. I feel like it kind of implies that like they're both far below the like economic strata of most of the rest of the kids here, which may be part of like where they connect.
It's like they are forced to be scrappy, and they've had to be scrappy together for so long that they've kind of formed a bond, even if they're not completely always on the same page.
Yeah. So then we cut to the first like rehearsal that they have, which is the scene when they when Father Leviach, is that how we say that?
Something like that.
Yeah, he says, to get our emotions going, we're going to play First One to Cry Wins. Starting now. I'm playing too. And so is Miss Patty. Okay, should we do that right now? One.
Listen, this literally, I think we were watching it together, Jamie, and I think that both Alice and I just started laughing because like this is classic like abusive theater practices in like academia. Like the pedagogy here is fucking insane. But I love, because I think that a lot of people who have traveled in theater circles, especially in this time, like there was a sense of like, if you're a good actor, then you will traumatize yourself for this, or you will like rip yourself apart inside. And it's sort of like, what do you mean we're all gonna try to cry right now?
It's giving Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah, a little bit.
But he's such the director, what's Stephen McKinley Henderson's the actor, he's such a gentle
he
presence.
wins, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
He
starts crying. He immediately starts crying.
The script. Oh shit! I just closed it.
It's so funny.
Hold on, I need to find. Okay, the script says they all try to cry really hard. Suddenly, everyone looks up, and Father Leviticus, I don't even, what's his name? Levitch, whatever, is sobbing. Everyone is uncomfortable watching an adult man cry, and he just says, "I'm sorry." So, but I think that also sets the tone for his character. Obviously, there's something going on.
Yeah. He has something that he has to work through too.
Yes.
Which is a weird thing in this movie, is like it's sort of like Charlie Brown, in that the adults are kind of removed from the main conversations of the show, except for her parents, where she has a lot of talking with. However, like you said, there is something going on with every single one of them. Yeah. Which is just really great writing.
Yeah, the math teacher, something going on with him.
Yeah.
Truly something going on. I wish there was something going on with me and him.
But I don't know. Anyways, we can get to him if we want to get to him later.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Honestly, if I had to identify with one character the most, it would probably be Beanie's character, Julie Beanie's character, because I also deeply had a crush on one of my high school teachers, who also deeply looked like this man.
There's a play called John Proctor's The Villain that you should read/see. But
I
it
have
is
seen it, actually.
Oh yeah, did you like it or no?
I didn't.
is it about a sexy high school teacher?
Yeah, that's sort of abusing his students.
Well, that's I don't know. The impression I get, maybe this is a cynical read of his character. Well, like Julie's a big teacher's pet, and he's like the cool teacher and the hot teacher, but he seems a little too into the students.
Yeah,
he's a little flirty behavior.
Yes, it's never made explicit, but it reminds me of a certain teacher that I had who did go
to prison
many steps. No, he didn't go to prison because she was of age when everything went down, but she was still a student.
When I was in high school, oh my God, or actually I wasn't even in high school, I was in middle school.
Wait, can I make something perfectly clear? That the man that I had a crush on, my teacher that I had a crush on in high school, never did anything to lead me on. This was all completely in my head.
Neither did the character.
Very, very obvious.
Neither did the character in the movie.
Yeah. Thank God.
I'm projecting.
I've had a lot. I've seen a lot of movies recently where it's just like, you know. So
I think that's kind of the thing.
Nice.
Yeah, the thing you're talking about of like what you expect of this. You know, there's no big tragedy in the movie.
So before we move on, I just want to talk about my experience with
a hot teacher.
Well, with an inappropriate sort of situation like that. Again, I was not in high school. This was my sister's story.
Do not edit this out.
So I was in middle school. My sister was in high school. My sister was very athletic and was on the cross country team, right? They had a coach named Coachy, and Coachy is a nickname they had for him. So I don't think I'm blowing up his spot, but also fuck this guy. So, okay. But he was like, I don't know, 40 or something, had wife, kids, all that kind of thing. he runs away with one of the team members, crosses state lines, and gets married with her. She's 16.
Did they go to New Hampshire?
Yeah.
Is she pregnant?
Fucking New
Are they still
Hampshire.
married?
They are still married. They have multiple kids. But I remember being...
So you're telling me it's a love story?
But I remember going with my parents to like the, gymnasium with all these parents being like, what the fuck?
Fuck that. I'm pretty sure that's in the Constitution of New Hampshire, though, right? That's the reason that state exists. So high school
to run
teachers
away.
can run away with underage students and get married there.
I feel like he eventually moved further out west to like Ohio or something.
Utah?
Maybe Utah, but it was like this thing where it got to the point where it was like legally it is going to be difficult to regain like custodianship of your daughter to that. It's like fucking crazy. Anyway,
Moving on.
yeah, moving on.
Something that did not happen in this movie. To be clear.
Let's make it clear.
Okay.
Okay, so then we cut to the grocery store, which is where her brother works. But that's where we meet Danny for the first time.
Yes.
And she introduces herself to Danny. I feel like Ladybird is definitely the person to make the first move.
Danny
in any
Timotei?
No, Danny.
Still Lucas
Focus.
Hedges.
Still Lucas Hedges. Yes.
Focus. Lucas Hedges.
Focus up, Nick.
You'll know when Timothée Chalamet is in the picture. Please know that I will.
I just want to talk about him so much.
I know, me too. I mean,
fucking
you
crazy
heard my
in this
top
movie.
10. You know I'm obsessed with Timothée Chalamet.
All right, but we should talk about Danny because
We should
Danny's
talk about
also a
Great
great
character.
character.
An amazing character. And I think a lot of people, especially our age, have a friend like this in high school. Danny presents himself as straight. We find out later that is not the case. But they kind of flirt in the grocery store, and she offers to help him with his hair for the play. So she's honestly so great because she puts in the moves to make sure that there's going to be a time that they talk again later.
Yeah.
And that's classic dating 101, folks.
That's high school flirting.
It really is, though. But I felt like the conversation was super organic. They have chemistry. You can tell. I mean, obviously it may
in that sort of teenager awkward way.
Yes, exactly. I think that they, even if it's not a romantic thing, later we find out, I think they have a lot of respect for each other.
Yeah, totally.
As he says explicitly, which is a scene I love when they're laying down and she goes, "You can touch my boob if you want." And he just goes, "I respect you so much."
Huge red flag.
It's so good.
It's
Because it
delivered perfectly as well.
it also, you feel that his family, he has a big family.
Yeah.
Like you get the sense, I mean, they're in Catholic school, but you get the sense that
The
his
Reagan
family's...
poster.
Yeah.
Yes, his grandma. Yeah, you get the sense his family is like pretty religious, which
Yeah.
obviously is a conflict later when he's struggling to come out.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's how we meet Danny. So she kind of sets the stage. And then...
But yeah, I think they basically start spending time together doing the play and stuff.
Yeah.
And
another thing I wanted to say about the play stuff is that I think it's so refreshing that our main character, to your point, Jamie, is somebody who is like super average. She's essentially like tree number 3 or whatever, like she's in the
Yes.
background. Yeah, she's the
titular
Tempest.
role.
It's so funny.
It's that whole interaction with her and Julie is... We'll read that out loud later when it comes up because it's a great back and forth. What were you gonna say, Patrick?
no, I mean, Nick, just the idea that she's average.
Yeah, I really love that when we see that in a movie because it just feels like, I don't know, it feels cozier to me because I can slip into a story like that so much easier than if it's like somebody who is kind of the destined hero or whatever. I just feel less of a disconnect immediately.
Right.
And it just feels like more of a true experience. And so that was why I really liked it, especially in this context, because I think that even if somebody is actually pretty exceptional as a teenager, everyone feels like this. They always feel like I'm just someone in the background kind of thing.
Yes.
And I think that this movie does a really great job of capturing that sort of like feeling of teenagerhood of like, I'm just, I'm never going to be anything big.
Yes.
Like I want to be someone, but I'm just not. I think that's just like such a cool thing that they explore in this movie, but it's like so subtle that it's not
Very
like
subtle.
beating you over the head with it.
Yeah.
I
It's
agree.
a little, it becomes a little hard if you map it as a as semi-autobiographical, because you're like, well, she does grow up to become Greta Gerwig.
Right, yeah.
But it's not necessarily, like she said, it's not an exact autobiography. So
Yeah. And also, but the other thing that I think that in stories we need more of is the idea that like you becoming big or famous or whatever doesn't have to be the part of the story that is the most meaningful. And even if this story is like a 1-to-1 match, like that's fine, because it also shows that like this exceptional person also went through like that there is more outside of it. Gets better, guys.
It really does.
Gets better.
I'm gonna say right
there's
now,
a moral
I don't
of
think
this
that there's
story is it gets better.
I don't think there's anyone I've met in my life that doesn't think it gets better.
Yeah.
Even if they had a good time in high school, and I genuinely did. Okay, moving on, we go to the homecoming dance. This is like the cowboy themed dance. Which I want to give another shout out to the amazing wardrobe department, because I loved Ladybird's outfit and wanted it for myself. But this is kind of when we get the first like intimate moments with her and Danny. They dance together, absolutely scandalous. And then the cutest little scene after, when they're like leaving for the dance, her and Julie are just have a sleepover, and Ladybird's like, oh, it's okay, I'm just going home, like whatever,
Mom's
just
picking me up.
yeah, just to get like that one extra minute with Danny, and like hopefully have a kiss, which they do, and it's so cute. And she has the most amazing reaction when she runs into that field and just does like that yippee moment.
Yeah.
I think everyone, even like in a theater, I feel like everyone just like totally on board, so excited. I think everyone knows that feeling when something just goes really well in a romantic way.
This did feel like this felt to me sort of like a point where I was like, oh, like, yes, something good is happening. And I was like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
because I was like, something bad is going to balance this out really soon.
Yeah, and it does.
Yeah.
It does, to be fair. It definitely does. And I loved, I think one of my favorite parts of like the show don't tell kind of thing is when she has Danny's name written above her bed. And then later it gets crossed out, but that I'll save for later.
Beats. I think one thing to say about this movie overall too is this movie's 90 minutes long.
Yes, I love that.
Which is part of what makes it so perfect, because it's just so it's so tightly scripted. It's like there's so much happens in the movie. And it's just
this. Like, I totally agree, Patrick. And in contrast to the Boyhood, which we'll talk about in a second, which I remember.
You mean in an hour?
Because like I remember we stopped Boyhood because we were also watching that all together. We stopped that at like an hour, and I was like, this feels like a full movie has already happened.
Yeah. Totally.
We haven't even hit like a third of the way through.
Yeah. Boyhood does feel long.
Yeah,
this does feel like it goes much faster.
Ladybird, and to your point about tight scripting, it just feels very intentional.
Yeah.
Like everything that we see is super intentional, which I really love.
Yeah, I mean, even just turning the pages to my script right now to kind of give the outline of the movie, every page I'm like, oh yeah, like that's kind of important. Like that's kind of important. It really is a thoughtfully crafted.
And each thing, like it might not seem like it, but each scene leads into the next, even if they are in different places at different times or whatever.
Yeah,
totally.
Which is really great.
So after the dance, we cut to her at home, coming home late.
Yeesh.
And I think this is another example of their her and her mom's relationship. It's actually a really, really intense scene because we find out later that I think her dad had just lost her job, and that was him telling her mom. And obviously that's a lot of stress on anyone, especially if you're financially in like dire straits. So I think it's just really big news and kind of frustrating news. And then it's kind of like a walking in at the worst perfect time. And Marion runs into the room with Ladybird and yells at her for not putting away her things, and who's going to give her father a job if she looks like shit every day at school and her clothes are wrinkled. And
definitely
I think
some transference there of stress.
Absolutely. No, 100%. And I would hope Ladybird would know that, but probably not because she's so young. But I think it leads to this like really intense moment where Ladybird says, don't you ever go to sleep without putting away all your clothes away perfectly, like even once? And don't you wish your mom hadn't gotten angry? And Marion says, in the most amazing delivery and devastating delivery, my mother was an abusive alcoholic. So I think that does play into why Marion struggles with motherhood sometimes. I think that's pretty obvious that there's times when she has a really hard time connecting with Ladybird and understanding Ladybird's emotional needs. Because I don't think she ever got that growing up.
So go ahead, Patrick.
I was just gonna say, I think too, she's like not purely like a disciplinarian too. Like you get that back and forth with her, because you think later in the movie when they all come home after getting high and they're like giggling on Thanksgiving, and the mom comes in and sees them and recognizes what's going on and just says it's good to see you and laughs. And so you get like both sides of that with her, that she's not just doing this.
She's not a fascist.
Yeah. And she really does struggle with like how to raise a child and not repeat what I assume she sees as like the traumas of her childhood.
Yeah, this is perhaps too much, but like one of the kind of crazy things about this movie is that every time we have either watched it or like gotten ready to talk about it, I've had like these very intense like conversations with my mom, like directly before and after. And like,
shout out to Nick's mom if she's listening.
Yeah, shout out, Mom. Sorry that we had that fight. Not entirely my fault, but you know what? I'm still sorry.
Drive down to Salem. Come on. Okay, can cut that part out.
But yeah, we'll deal with this in post. The thing about it though is like when I see this movie, to your points, where it's revealed that she has this really abusive, crazy childhood, like when I see the things that I relate to the most in my life, it is that stuff where like I just don't think that there are, like, especially with my parents, I just don't think they were ever given the skills to like function in an emotionally healthy way and like be communicative and have like these relationships that don't have stress and like yelling and bad communication in them.
That's
and
normalized.
It's normal. And then it's also like, why can't you just like why can't you deal with this? Like I deal with this, and like this is the way it's supposed to be. And it's like, it's not the way it's supposed to be. It doesn't have to be that way. And
or
I think
to Ladybird's credit, it doesn't always have to be perfect.
Yeah. But this is the thing too, is like Ladybird is obviously not completely blameless too. She also has a very hard time communicating, though much more reasonable since she's a teenager.
Yes.
But I think that it's interesting because there are these moments where it does feel like the mother is like she needs something and she just can't figure out how to get what she needs. And so then it comes out in this like really brusque, like pretty, like angry way. And Ladybird also internalizes that because you see her not even with her mom but with some of her other friends when she's in a really like stressful situation, she snaps in very much the same way as her mom.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's just like really interesting like tracking of that sort of issue that the family has.
I think that also leads to the point of like right before they start that scene when she runs into Ladybird's room, Ladybird's dad is like, don't do this right now.
Yeah.
Like just it's like this isn't the time. And she's like, no, she has to know.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think it was almost like searching for an escape from that that amazingly, like incredibly tough conversation. Yeah. And then looking for something to like almost like hold her, but knowing that she's not.
I was about to say they're like pretty much at every moment where they have like a real fight. Except for maybe the Grapes of Wrath one, though. Sure. I think it's sort of like
the titular fight. Sorry.
it does feel like is she looking for a hug? You know, are these people just like needing comfort? Right. And the way that they go about it is so wrong, so they never get that. But like I think about the ending, and we'll talk about the ending because I think it's one of the most prescient and like thing that sticks with you throughout the whole thing. The airport scene is what I'm thinking of. But like that I think is where the mask falls down, and the Greta lets us look at a private moment with the mom, and you see that very thing of like, oh, she just needs help. She needs help with these emotions.
And I think because you think the idea of like every fight is like looking for a hug to like I thought of the dress shopping scene fight, and she's like in the dressing room where she's like, do you What did she say?
I know you love me.
I know
but
you
do
love
like
me, but do you like me?
Yeah.
And I don't know
Dude,
if she does.
this is so brutal. I've literally had that conversation with my mom when I was a teenager. I was like, aren't we friends? And she was like, I'm not your friend. I'm your mom. And I was like, oh shit. So it's like, it's hard. Like being a parent and being like a child to parents is a really weird relationship.
Yeah.
and a tough job to have.
Yeah.
Because I think there are times when you do have to say, like, I am the mom here. Like, this is how this is going to go. And there's other times when, you're like, this person was made from me. And I want to, like, whether that's like ideas or biologically, but like, I want to like have a good relationship with this person where like they feel super comfortable with me. And I think that's hard to set, like, know where the line is of like being an authority figure and also having a close relationship with your child.
Yeah.
I think we know where Marion lands on that spectrum, but yeah, so I think that sets a tone for kind of another part of their relationship. And I think it gives background to why she is who she is as a parent. So moving on, cutting to the field scene when Patrick was talking about earlier, when it's kind of like a Ladybird Danny date, cute moment. That's the first time they say I love you to each other. That's also the first time that we hear about Ladybird's boobs and how Danny respects them. Which also Ladybird says back to that, if you had boobs, I wouldn't touch them either. Great line. So we're kind of, we're putting more depth into this relationship enough that Ladybird wants to spend Thanksgiving with Danny's family.
Which becomes a problem with her family.
Yes, it definitely upsets Marion that she's not going to be there. Kind of quoting, it's going to be like the last Thanksgiving, blah, blah, blah. So we see that she's upset. We get a cut to, this is also when we hear like, kind of, I feel like how Ladybird presents herself to like people at school when Danny comes and meets and picks Ladybird up to go to Thanksgiving. He says like the wrong side of the tracks statement, which you could tell like almost like shocks her mom and like or it hits home for her in a bad way.
Yeah. Well, it's because he's essentially saying like, you're poor.
Yeah.
Right. And they're incredibly, you can tell that their family's incredibly insecure about that.
Yeah.
Yes. And I don't think Danny knows that he's I think Danny's oblivious to what he's saying.
He thinks it's funny. Yeah.
Yes.
And I think Ladybird's doing it to try to be funny too. Like she
Yes.
tries to deflect through humor, but I think for her mom and her parents, it's like extremely serious.
Yes. Especially if you think about the economic insecurity with her dad. You know what I mean? So
and the completely opposite situation that is Danny's family, where Danny takes Ladybird to the house and
it's beautiful.
It's stunning.
And everyone
it's
is
her
like,
dream house. She literally said it's her dream house in Sacramento, her favorite house in Sacramento, which is established earlier with her and Julie. And I think it was also a cute moment when Danny's grandma says that she loves how she folds napkins. It was just kind of like here's an authority figure that loves me for me being kooky, weird, or whatever.
Right.
So I think she just kind of envisions herself like, this is what I could have. Like, I love Danny even more. I think that like solidifies.
Well, it's because she wants to live his life in some way. You know
Absolutely. What I mean? Okay, hold on. Let me pause to figure out what I'm going to talk about next. Sorry. But they're actual train tracks. Okay. Okay. So now let's talk about Kyle and meeting Kyle, because Ladybird meets Kyle at her coffee shop job.
This is Timothée.
Yes, this is Timothée. So
I just love how much of a fucking douchebag he is in this. Like he is so slimy.
Him
and
reading Howard Zinn.
Yes, and just there's
dead.
all the every detail.
Every detail is perfect. And like I thought that, again, coming into this movie kind of blind, I thought that Timothée was going to be some heartthrob or whatever, and him just being such a fucking like fuckboy douchebag is so funny to me.
Such a fuckboy.
Yeah, he like rolling his own cigarettes and all of that shit. Just so good. So yeah, let's keep going.
Okay, so then we cut to them out after one of the theater shows one night, kind of a la, at least in my hometown, it was everyone went to Friendly's after a theater show.
We went to Denny's.
IHOP.
Yeah, I think everyone has
something that was open 24 hours.
Yeah.
Yes. So we cut to, and Ladybird and Julie want to go to the bathroom, and that's when we walk in on Danny and one of the other, I think just a random random boy that's also in the show probably, kissing in the bathroom because they go into the men's bathroom because the women's bathroom's line is insane, which respect.
Classic.
It's funny that I forgot that plot point, and then it happened, and I was like, oh yeah, duh.
Yes.
Why else aren't they together?
And then, so obviously this is like earth shattering to her. I think she doesn't even know how to react in the moment. I think you find out later that she just kind of ignores him going forward. Like even when they do the play, you see she just like completely not really into it anymore. She kind of like walks away. So Danny kind of fades while Kyle kind of comes up because she has that little flirty exchange with him when she's at the coffee shop, and that happened before she figured out the thing with Danny. So I think this kind of solidified that, and we find out that Timothy / Kyle is part of a band that's going to be playing.
And they go, right? She goes,
They do go to see the band La France Nue or whatever it's called.
I think they see him earlier because she's dating.
After Thanksgiving.
They see him when she's with Danny
and they
still.
That
and he kind of
scene.
But anyways, now every single line that comes out of his mouth is so good.
He just doesn't care about anything, and I love that so much. You know what I mean?
Right, but he does though, or he thinks he does.
Yeah,
he just doesn't care about people, and you also don't. It's not explicit, but you're like, his family's super rich because he's like, I don't believe in the concept of money. I just want to exist off of bartering.
Yeah,
a crazy thing to say.
And
crazy
like
thing to say.
He's
a libertarian.
But I don't know if he is. I think he's kind of like pitched as like a left leaning just like child of privilege, because he's reading Howard Zinn, and then whenever the loss of virginity scene happens and he's like, oh, I didn't lose my virginity to you. And they get in an argument, and he's like, there's people dying and we're killing people in Iraq every day.
That is such a great scene.
Two things can be said. Or whatever she says. But I think he's just pitched as this like, he's holier than thou kind of.
Okay, let me rephrase. He's in that stage of being a teenager where you are falling in love with ideas rather than like people or like having empathy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they're flirting with each other. And this is also shortly after that our second semester begins at school. And that's where we kind of get introduced to Jenna. She's the popular girl.
I totally forgot about her.
She gives popular girl vibes, kind of like sexy indifference, just towards everything. And like sex isn't a big deal. She has a boyfriend and like they clearly do things, blah, blah, blah. And I think that's also kind of like a Ladybird wants that. She wants to feel cool. She wants to feel wanted. More than anything, I think in this movie, she wants to feel wanted no matter where it's coming from.
I think the way they portray the popular kids in this movie is so accurate and relatable to me, because they have Ladybird wants to be one of them so bad and wants to hang out with them, and then when she actually does, they don't actually do anything. And they're not cool. Like they're like this place they always talk about where they go hang out, the Deuce, is a parking lot. And then like when they go to prom and they're like, oh, like let's blow like that scene's super relatable to me, where she's like, no, I actually want to do this thing. Like I actually wanted to go to prom.
This is like a seminal part of my childhood.
And they're like so above it, and they just want to like drive around and like drink. I just feel like when I was not popular in school, but I wasn't like
shocked.
I wasn't.
Were you popular, Jamie?
I don't know if I would say I was popular, but I feel like a lot of people knew me.
I maybe feel the same way. Keep going, Patrick.
Continue, Patrick.
Just that feeling's relatable though. I had middle school, definitely I wanted to be popular and hang out with the popular kids. But this kind of thing, I do remember this kind of thing happening where you actually spend time with them and you're like,
this sucks.
These people kind of suck.
I remember every cast party I ever had, all of the theater kids would get together, and there were definitely popular ones, and I would try so hard to be hanging out with them, and all they would want to do is just like the most boring party shit that teenagers do,
Yeah.
whereas everyone else was like, what if we like watch Mystery Science Theater?
improv
Yeah,
dance?
what if we do fucking shit like that? So good.
My people.
I think like I want to talk about the Deuce a little bit before we move on.
The Deuce?
The Deuce is the parking lot.
Yeah.
Because her and Jenna get tight after they like vandalize one of the nuns' cars in a funny way, like just married to Jesus. Hilarious. And that's how they become friends. And you kind of feel like she's leaving Julie behind. I think that's worth noting as well, that she's like, if I can be popular, I'm going to do it. I don't care what the cost. So when we get to the parking lot, that's where we see Kyle again. And Ladybird knows this. That's why she wanted to go there. And so she's talking to Kyle, and they have the funniest conversation I've ever heard in my life. And I'm going to read it. Sorry. Jenna says, Kyle, Ladybird and I just decorated the nun mobile like just married to Jesus. Kyle says, that's hella tight. Amazing. He nods, appreciating this. And then Kyle says to Ladybird, what you do is very baller, very anarchist. And then Ladybird says, yeah, fuck him. Amazing line. No, that's my favorite line in the movie, honestly.
I love that.
So we kind of see her shifting gears to Kyle, shifting gears to the popular. And then we're going to shift to Jenna's house. There's a party happening there. And Ladybird gets invited, and this kind of develops her and Kyle's relationship a little bit more. I think this is their like second conversation, but they're alone. They're by the pool.
He's rolling cigarettes.
Yeah, he says rolling your own is best. I'm also trying to, as much as possible, not participate in our economy. I don't like money. I'm trying to live by bartering alone.
Oh, so that Ladybird starts smoking cloves because her brother's girlfriend does it, and she's like, well, this is cool. Also very relatable, of being like, oh my god, they're like cigarettes, but you don't have to inhale and they taste good.
Yeah, and then lick your lips. Crazy.
Classic theater kid.
But yeah, you kind of get what is it? They're clearly super, into each other. They're making out at the party.
Yeah.
Yes.
They say they're both virgins.
Yep.
You hear him say it, but he hasn't. Although he hasn't lied in 2 years. So
Yes.
who can say?
A good point, Patrick. Ladybird says, I don't want to have sex yet. I haven't had sex yet with another person. No, me neither. That's what Kyle says. So then they start making out. And then we cut to more of Ladybird and her mom. They're in the bathroom talking about college. Ladybird asks if her dad's depressed.
What a crazy, this scene and like that is just like a thing that I relate to, but like what a crazy thing to show. I don't know. It's like what a crazy intimate thing to show on screen, because like, we see in horror films like horrible things happening to people, but having a moment where you look at your mom and say, is Dad depressed? Like that is like, it made me feel real. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. And she says she sees it from the pills, and I feel like her mom doesn't really give her a real answer either, or like support her at all, really, because she just says being successful doesn't mean anything in and of itself. It just means that you're successful. And Ladybird says, yeah, but then you're successful. And then Marion says, but that doesn't mean you're happy. And Ladybird says, but he's not happy. So I think it just shows that they just have such a hard time making a connection in any type of conversation, even if it's not them fighting. Yeah.
And I also think the mom feels as though like she needs to operate from a place of strength. Yeah. And this is a moment where she's trying to give that she's trying to show that the dad is also operating from a place of strength. Because I guess, there is a theory that like you don't want your kids to see you at your worst or at your lowest, or see your weaknesses, because then they can't rely on you or whatever. I don't subscribe to that, but I feel like this family very much does.
Yeah, just the economic precarity is like the weighs so heavily on the mom, especially. And that's just like a huge source of her self-worth and like shame. So.
Yeah.
I think it also shows later when Marion says to Ladybird like how it upsets Larry that her dad, that he can't drive her up to school. He drops her off a little bit farther away because she thinks it's because she's embarrassed. And Larry's like, why'd you have to bring that up? Like, please, like, I think that just also shows the dynamic, how different the dynamics are of that relationship too. Yeah. Okay, so next we get an iconic scene of Ladybird losing her virginity and getting a bloody nose during, which I feel like is so high
funny.
school.
Nothing can go right. Something embarrassing has to happen.
Totally.
It just is great.
And also Kyle is just so like nonchalant about the whole thing.
You were saying this off mic, but the whole thing about her being on top during her first time.
Yes.
Like, it is so funny, like how uninterested in her well-being.
Yeah.
Because she initiates it too, I feel like. And also I'm going to tell you right now that if I lost my virginity and I was on top, I would have literally lost my mind and been so upset.
It's just so funny. The line later when she's like, who does that? And then she's like, I think I like dry humping better.
And honestly, good for her. I love that. Love that journey. But after they have sex, which is pretty lackluster, Ladybird did not come. Let's put that out there. She finds out that was not him losing his virginity, which was huge for her because she thought they were going to lose it together. It's going to be a special moment. I think we all have a vision of what we think losing our virginity is going to look like.
But it's always awful.
It's always awful.
And this captures it perfectly.
Absolutely.
Just like, it's not who you think it's going to be with, and it's not as good as you think it's going to be. And
he says that. He says you're going to have tons of meaningless sex in your life.
Yeah, which is true, but not the thing you want to hear after losing your virginity. Yeah, give me some perspective to enjoy that statement.
So they kind of promptly break up-ish. They never were going out.
He says that he'll still go to prom with her.
Yeah.
So that's like an important plot point later that he says, okay, like, sure, whatever. So they set out for prom and they go with Jenna and Jenna's boyfriend. So there's like a lot of awkwardness in the car.
Yeah, because everyone's still kind of fighting, right?
Yeah, you can tell that, like, because her and Jenna have kind of broken things off when Jenna understands that Ladybird was lying to her about where she lived and like certain things about herself. So there's just a lot of tension in the car. And then Dave Matthews Band starts playing. And that was kind of, I feel like,
fixes everything.
As it does. I think that was like a turning point for Ladybird where she kind of realized that she doesn't have the right priorities, especially in terms of friends. And they kind of say like, let's just not go to prom. Like, we don't even want to go anyway, which is in line with Kyle's character. And Ladybird, I'm really happy, stands up for herself and says that she doesn't want to not go to prom. That's important to her. And can they drop her off at her best friend's house, which she means is Julie. So we kind of come in and Julie's sad. You can tell that she wanted to go to prom, and seeing Ladybird kind of reigniting their friendship. They go to prom. They have an amazing time. Because they hadn't been talking, she finds out that Julie's going to college nearby, and Ladybird says
I thought she's not going to college.
She is going to college, but she's going to college nearby, but she's spending the summer with her dad, who came up in Yosemite or something.
Her dad resurfaced, which is
what a fucking crazy line.
And you just get the line when they reunite too. Or you just get the line when she's like, why are you crying? And she's like, what'd she say? Some people just aren't built happy.
Yes. Which is something I definitely identify with. Yeah. Which is another reason why I really love Julie.
Medicated.
Hashtag Lexapro girly. But I think Julie's character is a great character to kind of dive into when you're on your like second or third rewatch, which is a crazy thing to say. But I think you kind of see that she has so much going on, and every time she does talk, it does give a lot of context to her life, like saying like, my dad resurfaced in Yellowstone. Like that says a lot about their relationship and kind of what she grew up with, and her mom and her and her mom's apartment. So they go to prom, they have an amazing time. And then we cut to graduation, and then Danny mentions that the wait list for NYU in front of Marion, because Ladybird did get waitlisted at NYU. which is so exciting. And we're so excited for her. That scene was so cute. She was so happy.
Patrick, what is her dad say?
Yeah, Danny comes in and congratulate in front of the family, and her dad just like whispers like "fuck," and it's such a perfect. It's
complete tonal shift because they were excited, and even I think Marion was having like a good time at that dinner, being like, you walked down the stage weird, but like you did it and I'm proud of you kind of vibes.
But also, isn't it sort of like, I might be remembering wrong, but the mom wants Ladybird to stay nearby for college.
Yes.
And Ladybird wants to get the fuck out of there and go as far away as possible. And she got into a local college, but then this is the waitlist for NYC, which is where she actually wants to go. And so the mom is sort of like also being like, fuck, because she doesn't want her to go.
Right. I'm pro Ladybird in this movie, but her mom wants her to go to a state school and pay in-state tuition. Ladybird wants to go to NYU, which is
crazy.
Dolores. That's the one thing where I'm like,
come on.
I'm going to side with mom on this one.
As now that we're like, you know, we're around our 30s, it's like looking back, Ladybird's a fucking idiot. But in when I was in that space, I remember I remember being like, if any of these art schools let me in for musical theater, which was what I was trying to do at the time, then I was like going to go there and spend, you know, $75,000 a year or whatever it was. I ended up going to college in Canada, which is, you know, $15,000 a year. So much of a better choice. However, at the time, it felt like the end of the world.
Yes,
so like, I feel like Ladybird is operating from that viewpoint, you know? And
like, you know, and you're told by, I mean, I guess Ladybird isn't in the movie, which is funny. The guidance counselors are like, lower your expectations. But I feel like, at least in my experience, they're like, you can go wherever you want. Yeah. Money's not an issue. Apply for financial aid. Yeah. Which they don't tell you are loans that you have for the rest of your life. They're like, it's financial aid. That's free money. They're
aiding you.
Yeah, financially. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. I
think the only place I applied to Duke because I lived in North Carolina. I didn't get in. And I don't know that I would have gone there anyway because like I wanted to do engineering. So I went to state school. But
I kind of had something similar with Ladybird did where I got waitlisted at Syracuse, which has a great acting program. I went in for musical theater, but they waitlisted me for just like the normal acting program. If I had just applied for normal acting programs, I am sure that I would have done fine, but I can't sing or dance. Not really sure what I was doing there. However, I remember being like, I don't know,
Nick, I've seen you at karaoke.
Don't sell yourself short.
I was like, do I try to go to Syracuse at $60,000 a year?
No.
And like wait for like to see if I get in, or do I accept at Dalhousie, which is the Canadian school? And my dad was like, you're gonna fucking go to Canada. Like,
what was the mascot?
No way. For Syracuse?
No, for Canada.
We were the Dalhousie Tigers.
Go Tigers.
And we were black and gold. So black and yellow was played a lot at sporting events.
I hate that.
Also, our hockey team never won a single game while I was there, my tenure, but everyone would go because they were the meanest motherfuckers around, and they would just beat the shit out of the other teams to the point where like
we respect that.
Yeah, we wouldn't get through a full game with all of the players on the ice anymore because they would be thrown out.
I'm going to tell you something right now. If that was me in college, that would have been the hottest thing you could have ever said.
Dude, but the thing is
now
that
I'm like,
the captain, who is the enforcer, didn't have most of his teeth. He was like, it was not like you think like, oh yeah, that would be like what a display of like manhood or whatever. But no, it's because I've seen the movie
Miracle and and they're undeniably hot in that movie constantly. But getting back on point.
Also, I just want to say the Julie and her relationship being repaired is like legitimately one of my favorite parts of the movie, of them being able to like reconnect.
It's extremely satisfying.
And it's something that I feel like I relate to quite a bit of, you know, you spend a lot of your teenage years and even like your early 20s and stuff chasing the group that you want to be a part of rather than the group that has fully accepted you.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is something that I still deal with, you know, like that sort of like dissonance, and seeing that kind of perfectly represented on film is just really cool. And when they got back together, and like you said, like it's happy, but it's also, you know, not everyone is built happy like that. You know, it's a good line. It's a good line.
And like coming in and out of relationships, like I think we've all had times in our life where we've been like closer to one friend, and then time has gone on, and you know, there's distance, and then you like rekindle that, and it's so special to rekindle it and have it feel different but the same in a lot of ways, like
Yeah.
comfortable. And I think you see that immediately when they get back together, like just the comfort comes back almost instantly when they're laughing and playing with the string cheese or whatever, or the what's that stuff called? It's like canned cheese, whatever.
Cheese it whip or whatever.
Like anything can be funny when you're with the right person.
Yeah.
Anything can be fun when you're with the right person. And I think that's a beautiful way of showcasing their relationship of just like they can make anything fun, and they had the best time at prom, like when they were taking the photos together. It was a great way to put a button on that.
Yeah,
I
and it's
think.
sort of like the end of their friendship for a while, at least. It's not like the end,
at least in the
but
movie.
like it's like they're not going to see each other for a long time, kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
I hope
there's
there's a Ladybird 2, and then it's Julie going to visit her at college, and her not being in what's the thing?
Yellowstone,
No, what is
Booksmart.
no?
What are you talking about?
Beanie Feldstein did what's that on Broadway?
Girl?
And she doesn't do Funny Girl. Sorry, she wasn't good. I saw it. Continuing on.
Yeah, so they have this sort of fight with her parents, and it kind of, is like, oh God, they can't have a happy moment ever. But then
I mean, Marion straight up gives her the cold shoulder.
Yeah.
Like
She stops talking to
ignores
her.
Ladybird, and you see that it's not just like a one day thing. It's pretty much feels to me like the rest of the summer.
Yeah.
Because she
Yeah,
gets her
until they leave.
license. She gets. You just see a bunch of things kind of.
she does get like, fully accepted too. Like
Yes.
like she decides, I'm going to NYU.
Yeah. And you see her, there's like a montage of like the whole summer where it's just like time goes on and she's still not talking to
I
her.
think she asked her dad, like, why won't mom talk to me? And it said something along the lines of her not being able to express
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. Yeah, because it goes up until the point of leaving the airport scene.
Yeah.
She's still not really talking to her.
Well, why don't we go there? I think it's because, is there any big moment between there and the end that we want to hit?
I think stuff in New York, but
But that's
before
the airport
that,
scene.
I think the airport scene is.
Oh, Patrick, what was
I was just saying the only thing we skipped over, which we can just say briefly, which I think at least is the biggest emotional 1-2 punch of the movie for me, is when she makes up with Danny when he comes back to the restaurant.
Yeah.
And falls into her arms and sobs because he can't come out to his family.
Yes.
And then immediately after that, you get the scene of the priest seeing her mom for like psychiatric care.
Yeah.
Yes.
And talking about not having a support system. And
Yeah.
it's just those small moments that are like just add to the overall fabric of the movie, even though they're not as narratively important.
Yeah.
But I think too, having her reconcile too with Danny and reestablishing this really close friendship that they have is also like a really, really meaningful. Similarly to like the Julie stuff.
Yeah, I think there's a respect there. I think it was a growing learning moment when Danny came out to Ladybird, because you can tell she was so upset to see him. She ignored him and she went in the back. He found her in the back and was like, please listen to me, starts crying. And instead of, talking about how angry she is, she gives him a hug.
Yeah.
He's he's obviously
school, yeah.
devastated.
Yeah.
And I think she understands in that moment that like, yeah, we're going to fight. There's like little shit. Obviously what happened and how it went down isn't the best.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't really considerate of her feelings, but I think obviously he's
going through stuff.
He's going through a lot of difficult emotions when you're that young to sort through. And I think that clicks for her.
Yeah.
And you can see it in the moment that it clicks for her when she sees how absolutely devastated he is.
Let's talk about another moment that's absolutely devastating.
Truly
The airport.
devastating.
The airport.
Maybe
This is my favorite
the
scene.
devastating. It is the best scene in the movie.
It's so,
You know the Charlie XCX song? Did you know she sang? I'm sorry. That song's called Apple. Do you know what I'm talking about? The Charlie XCX song,
Yeah.
Apple. Okay, 'cause she said that apple is rotten right to the core. Then the chorus, I thought she was still saying the apple in a British accent, but she's saying the airport.
Oh.
But I thought it sounded like airport, and I convinced myself, no, she's just saying apple. I'm wrong. But then it turns out, sorry.
the classic
She's
Brat
saying
Summer
the
mistake.
airport.
Classic Patrick.
In case people didn't know.
Yeah, we're not just a movie podcast. We're a music podcast.
Anyways.
So we cut to the airport scene.
Yeah, they're dropping Ladybird off.
Marion's still ignoring her to the point where she doesn't really even say goodbye.
That was crazy.
Does not get out of the car.
Does not get out of the car.
She
Actually,
like basically drives away, but she's like, I gotta keep pulling through.
yeah,
kind of
giving
thing.
the classic excuse of like the cops gonna come and like tell me to move.
Yeah.
And then we just kind of
the best shot in the film, which is a long shot.
One shot,
Yeah.
A beautiful one shot of just absolutely having emotions overtake you and like understanding that you fucked up.
Yeah.
You fucked up.
And you see the panic in her face too, because she has to circle back. She's trying to circle back around the airport. You know that feeling where you're like, I just have to get back to the terminal, but it's so long, and you see the panic of her face of like wanting to make it in time.
Yeah, well, and let's kind of explain it a little bit more clearly too, because we all know what we're talking about, but basically what has happened is she has left Ladybird to go to school, like go on the airplane by herself, and has not said goodbye. And this long tracking shot is us going from her being kind of stone-faced to slowly starting to cry, then starting to sob, and then to your point, Patrick, starting to panic because she starts looping back around because she's like
driving faster.
Yeah, so like I can go and see my daughter before she's gone. And I think the best part of the scene is when she pulls up and she's already gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the
And she kind of
Larry
falls
walking
into
back.
her husband's arms.
And he says what he says, she'll come back, I think.
Yeah, like she'll come back to visit.
Yeah, the fact that she doesn't make it in time and you don't get this big denouement of their relationship.
Yeah.
It's
again one of the reasons why I like this movie quite a bit is the cinematic thing to do would have had this big catharsis moment between her and her mom right before she goes to college.
Sure.
And that is denied for both of them. And instead we have to kind of keep going on slightly unfulfilled, which is what life is.
Yes. Yeah, that relationship doesn't get repaired the day you leave for college.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that it does get repaired a little bit. I think that there's going to be many, many years of them working on it, and honestly therapy for them to ever even probably halfway repair that relationship. But I think a big step forward is when she gets to New York and finds a bunch of these letters that her mom had written to her. A bunch of them were like crumpled up, like she clearly went through like a bunch of drafts to find the right way to word what she wanted to say to Ladybird, which was basically like, I love you, I'm proud of you, I'm not a perfect mother, I wish I could be, but just know that like you're an important person in my life and I'll always be there for you.
Yeah.
Obviously she didn't say it just like how I did, but you can tell that's what she was trying to say. And she calls her dad and her dad's like, don't tell her that I like sent you the letters.
Yeah.
I
And
mean, that's part of it too. Yeah, it's just her being unable to actually say these things to her daughter.
yes, a very like perfect visual of just like how hard it is to communicate.
Yeah, good guy dad in that moment. Like
Amazing dad moment. He's an amazing dad throughout the entire movie.
And then like
I think that sparks the first, like, obviously she's starting a new chapter. She's going to college. I think everyone kind of reassesses how they want to be presented as a person when they go to college because, you're with completely new people. You can be whoever you want to be. And I think that's evident when she introduces herself at that party saying her name's Christine.
Yeah.
Huge moment.
Changing from Ladybird. Yeah, she's like fully changed who she's presenting herself as and who she wants to be seen as, which is cool.
It's so cool.
In a very subtle way of like indicating that in the script. Again, very good writing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, just in the last scene too, the visual storytelling is very good in this movie. Where even just the telling of her going to the party, going home with the guy.
Yeah.
And then, like, through no dialogue, you get her leaning over to puke, her getting taken out of the dorm room in an ambulance. Just like the escalation of this. You're like, okay, she's really like going for it.
She's trying to
first day in the big city.
Yeah, she's making a new go of it, which I think is great. And then it sort of ends on the note of like her in this new place, ready to
she goes to church, which kind of I think is like an homage to going to Catholic school. Like there's comfort there for her, and I think in the church service she is moved to tears. She starts crying, and I think between the letters, having that first night turn out how it did, I think we all know what like hangover guilt feels like. I think like that's definitely playing into it too, being moved to tears by something that reminds her of home. She does call home. She leaves a voicemail for her mom, and she thanks her. Thanks for helping, and it's a beautiful message. And I think it's like the first step to like actually maybe repairing their relationship. And that's how the movie ends.
I think that's important. Again, it's not a conversation. It's a message she leaves for her mom. But that is like the closest that you get from Ladybird too, of her like flat out kind of stating something as like just like emotionally, this is the thing. I guess that passage feels the most like written to me of the movie, because she kind of has this thing. It's kind of like speaks to the love letter to San Francisco or Sacramento. Sorry, she talks about just having memories of driving and knowing those roads so well. And I think thinking about the airport scene too, it works really well because the movie has a lot of driving scenes.
Yeah, it's based around car transport.
Yeah, it's very based around cars, and you kind of get a feel of the place based on a lot of those scenes. I think you get both scenes of the landscape from cars, and you get a couple scenes of like the airport shot of people in the cars. So I think it's kind of like situated in that context, which makes it work really well.
Yeah, it's like the love letter to Sacramento being brought back at the end.
It does feel like this movie is one of the tensions that gives it some dramatic heft, I think, is that it's constantly a movie about people trying to sprint away from how they're living, who they are and how they're living their life in the moment, and trying to start something new. And then when they get there, kind of like feeling nostalgic or wanting to go back. Like same with the friendship stuff. Like she sprinted away from Julie to become popular and everything, and then she gets there and she's like, I don't want this, and then she goes back. You know what I mean? So there's like a lot of those moments throughout the movie, and like when she gets to New York, she's like has that moment in the Catholic church where it reminds her of home, and she's like missing this place as well. It's just really well made. I like this movie a lot. I
think we'll end Ladybird by me reading the voicemail, because I think rereading it just now, it's kind of the perfect wrap up.
Yeah, let's do it.
So Christine says, hi Mom and Dad, it's me, Christine. It's the name you gave me. It's a good one. Dad, this is more for Mom. Hey Mom, did you feel emotional the first time you drove in Sacramento? I didn't. I wanted to tell you, but we weren't really talking when it happened. All those Bens I've known my whole life, in stores and the whole thing. I wanted to tell you, I love you, thank you, thank you. Yeah. She just ended on that. So I think that's a perfect end before we jump into Boyhood.
Which we'll do right after this break. Welcome back to Movie versus Movie. We are jumping into Boyhood. Splash. Patrick, take us away.
Yeah, so I think the good thing about Boyhood is it's twice as long as Ladybird, so we'll talk about it. I think the good thing about Boyhood is, I think in one contrast, Ladybird
I promise
is
to shut up.
No. This is
the first and last appearance of Jamie on the
podcast. She'll be on Ladybird Part 2 to go over everything we missed. Yeah. Ladybird's so well scripted and densely plotted in that 90 minutes, whereas Boyhood, I think Ladybird exists kind of as a slice of life movie, but is more like
one
deliberate.
Slice.
Yeah, whereas Boyhood is
it's a whole pie.
a lot of slices.
This is the metaphor I'm gonna, if I could take that to the next stage, which is Ladybird is like a slice of cake that you eat and you're like, I'm very satisfied with that slice of cake, and Boyhood is a slice of cake that you eat half of and then you're like, I still have half of this cake.
I feel like Boyhood is that variety cheesecake you can buy where there's a bunch of different slices of different flavors.
Yeah, but it's I don't think the plot's as important to go detail by detail through, because it's kind of a movie that washes over you. And I had this phenomenon of, I watched it before and when it came out and I remember that I loved it, but I could not remember specific scenes, lines and stuff, versus I think Ladybird, a lot of that stuff sticks with you more. But Boyhood is a movie directed by Richard Linklater, known for like School of Rock, the Before trilogy.
I personally love him.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan.
I love School of Rock.
School of
the
Rock's
Before
a great
trilogy.
movie.
We've actually done. We did an episode on each of them. I think that he is a good director. I had another like expectation coming into this movie that we were talking about earlier of like, oh, this is what this movie is going to be. I was also pleased that it was not exactly what I thought either. But continue, Patrick.
The main conceit of the movie is that Richard Linklater formulated this movie and then shot it over the course of 12 years.
Yeah,
where they would shoot
with the same actors.
Where they would shoot a portion of scenes each year.
You know what's crazy about that is that he would write the next section that they were going to film like right before they filmed it.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I was kind of curious about that. If he had a plot, if he had a script for the whole movie.
No.
So it's both. So he did have an overarching like plot that he wanted to tell, but he would rewrite the sections to be specific to what was happening in the characters or like the actors' lives and everything, so that it could track with them growing up, essentially.
Yes, Nick is correct.
So I think what we talked about before watching this movie, I think part of your expectation of it is you described it as a gimmick movie.
I did.
And I think that's accurate in the sense of like that's how it was marketed, and it did really well. This was a pretty successful movie for being like really low budget.
It was also like put into like the Congressional like film archive, and it didn't it win an Academy Award or at least nominated?
It was nominated. Patricia Arquette won the Oscar, and I think it was marketed as a gimmick movie. But I kind of I feel like in a lot of ways like this is not a gimmick movie, and every other movie is a gimmick movie in the sense of like
That's right,
when
Patrick,
you watch a
tell 'em.
movie that changes time periods, either they change actors or they put an actor in makeup.
Same with the design of set and all that kind of stuff. They completely overhaul.
And you're immediately aware of that, or you kind of that's that kind of disbelief. You have to suspend your disbelief because you're like, obviously, I have to pretend that this is the same person. But you're constantly tracking that in a movie when someone has like old age makeup, and you're like, well, is that how they would look when they're older?
Sure.
And so, like the experience of actually watching this movie, I think you get a little bit of that every time it changes time periods because you clock it and you're like, oh wow, they look different.
Sure.
But I also think you just like, at least for me, my experience watching it, it lets you just like experience it better because you're like, these are these people, this is what they look like as they age. And it doesn't like, you don't have to like turn that part of your brain off.
Yeah.
And I think he also was like, come as you are in this moment,
Yeah,
like how you are,
really?
how
They
you
didn't-
dress, how your hair is.
Yeah, they didn't do a design, and that's why you kind of see kind of a radical transition of what the main character looks like from moment to moment, because that's actually the natural progression of their kind of sense of self, which I think is great.
Hardest transition for me was when he was bald, like his when they cut his hair.
We'll get there, man.
Or
One thing I want to say, like I'm not entirely sure that this tracks for anyone else, but Alice was saying that she got a little bit of like uncanny valley because it was the same actors throughout, and like I guess kind of to your point, Patrick, of like how we have been trained to watch movies, and this kind of does something completely different. She was like, it kind of took me out of it to be like, whoa, that's that actor, but like 10 years later, and like, wow, my brain is processing that, and it's like put together so close at the time, like timing doesn't feel right. However, like I think that is more like a sense of dissonance from how we usually watch movies, and there's much more of a clear delineation between time periods in normal movies because they usually use other actors or whatever, and so it's like easier for your brain to be like, click, this is someone else somewhere else or whatever.
I got like less taken away out of it from that in a good way.
I think the like closest analog is like the Harry Potter movies where you're watching kids grow up, but even that they're trying to maintain a consistent aesthetic to them, so they're
I also didn't like the Order of Phoenix when they cut his hair short. Maybe I just don't like men with short hair.
Make it bigger than it was in Goblet of
Single
Fire.
men of the world, please no.
Higher the hair, the closer to God. One thing I want to say that we talked about, Patrick, and I just want to mention it at the top before we go through the plot, is that holy shit, this movie is a nostalgia machine. Like it
crazy.
perfectly captures specific moments in time to the point where I was like, I feel like I am being transported back in. It's like a time capsule. It was so crazy.
And I think it's able to be done, more effortlessly because they are just honestly portraying what was popular at that time when they were shooting it, which is cool. But I think
music really got me.
yes, the music.
Opening on Coldplay, my heart.
Man. The best.
People of this podcast must think that my
insane.
music taste is absolutely absurd.
Coldplay
you
and Dave
love
Matthews
Coldplay
Band.
and Dave. Don't lie. That
To
you
be
don't
fair,
love them.
yeah, I absolutely love Coldplay. I absolutely love Dave Matthews Band, and those were my two favorite bands in high school. So between both these movies, I'm very covered.
No, but the I'll just say the most jarring music is when they play Soldier Boy, but it leads immediately into like scenes of abuse, which is wild. But also, I do think the first half of the movie leans really hard into the nostalgia stuff, and then I think the second half kind of moves away from it, which maybe I think one that kind of like speaks to like the development of the character.
This is the thing. In the first half, he goes through two pretty intensely abusive stepfathers.
Yeah.
And in the second half, it's more about him like coming into his own and becoming a grown-up.
Yeah.
And like, it felt like two separate movies.
It kind of does.
Yeah.
I think the best way, without going into too much detail of the plot, for the first half, there's a reel. I think there's kind of a genre of reels, like Instagram reels or like TikToks, where it's like a guy like playing like Wii bowling, and it's like POV me playing Wii bowling while my parents like lose their house in the housing crisis in the background. I feel like that's like the first half of the movie because you get these like really distinct cultural like waypoints of that time while the family is like going through some like serious
Multiple
traumatic experiences.
crises.
Yeah.
So I guess just to like the basic plot of the movie. So our main character is Mason, who in the movie uses he, him. So I think for the character.
Yeah, the actor later came out as non-binary, but like Boyhood, this is a a young boy in the movie at least.
But it's centered around him and the family essentially. So he has an older sister. I don't remember her name.
Samantha.
Who's
thank you.
Linklater's daughter?
Yes.
Yeah.
Who halfway through filming was like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Honestly,
Can you kill me off? And I'm not joking. She asked if he could kill her off, and he was like, no, that's like, so that's not what I want this movie to be about. Like, no. So I'm just going to cut down your role. And I think later she got more like when he goes to visit her at college. Yeah. That's when she got like more like, okay, fine, I'll do it. But there's like, I feel like a good chunk of like a half hour of this movie when like you don't really see her.
Yeah,
I love that though.
Yeah.
But I feel like you understand because he's like, I'm going to need two child actors who are going to need to do this every year for 12 years.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he's like, it'll be very hard to have two people who going through all the changes they will. So one of them is just going to be my daughter and I'm going to make her do it.
And she does a great job, to be fair. I think she plays older sister really well.
It's funny because when I saw this movie when it came out in 2014? Yeah, 2014. I guess to place ourselves, we're all pretty contemporaneous with this character. I think we have like 2.5 years between us.
It tracks on my life almost perfectly. Like it's a little later than me. Because I think he goes to college. This came out in 2014. I was in my third year of college. So it's like a 3-year difference for me, but you guys are a little bit younger than me. So it probably tracks almost exactly.
That's the thing.
It's scary how accurate.
Yeah. Seeing it in 2014 versus when I'm 20 versus seeing it now when I'm 30 is a very different experience. Cause I think now I'm relating more with the parents. I still obviously relate to the kid characters, but I'm starting to relate more with the parents. Whereas then it was so like visceral. And I even think I thought at the time, the kids' performances were worse when I first saw it. I was kind of like, as they get older, they kind of aren't that good. Watching it this time, that didn't bother me as much. I don't think either of them are.
I think that, and if I may armchair psychoanalyze you for a second, I think that is the difference between watching it at 20 and 30 is that at 20 you're so close to who that is that like, because in your brain you're like, when you're a teenager, you're like, I'm so fucking cool or whatever, like whatever I do, like but it kind of comes off to everyone else as being sort of like withdrawn and kind of, awkward and stuff like that. But now as a 30-year-old looking at back with some perspective, you're like, oh no, that tracks.
Like, that's a very honest portrayal of that time in your life.
Absolutely. And I think like when you get to the end and he's at college And I remember being like, yeah, like that's me right now. And like, he's so cool. And like, he's hot, whatever. And now I'm like, he looks like a baby. Like, oh my God.
But I think you have like, similar to Ladybird, his kind of development in this latter half of the movie. Like, you don't get a ton of character development of him.
He's sort of like he's almost a camera in a way. He is a photographer. Literally, maybe that is Linklater being
Nick.
pretty obvious there, and I'm picking it up.
No,
I
I
love
just thought
that.
that. But I think but I think you get, similar to Ladybird, the sense of him wanting something more in his life and not being able to like articulate that and like express that in a way. And I think that really like resonated, of like the stuff he's saying at the end, like, you know,
When they're in the car going to college, and he's like, I don't need a cell phone or whatever.
Right. He thinks he's so profound, and there's some like profundity there where he's like, I think life is just like a collection of moments, like the last line of the movie. But it's also just like, it's stuff you say when you're 18.
Yeah,
and you're like,
totally.
Want to be deep. But I feel
But you're also like legitimately figuring out like, like I think that if someone said it to me at 18, I would have been like, ooh. Of course, now I'm like, life's shit. I mean, I love whatever, but
I think that's like the like closest to like thesis of the movie, is this like collection of moments idea. Yeah. But it also, between these two movies, I was just like, you realize why there are so many high school coming of age movies, because it's got to be really fun to write high school characters, because you can have them say exactly, you know, you can have them say just like extremely obvious, I guess, stuff that would just feel like ridiculous,
like cringe.
Like for example, if you're I don't know, like a mid-30s guy who's on a popular sitcom about being on a hospital and you write a movie about your home state, I don't know, it's like New Jersey or something
like that.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm so profound.
Yeah. You're trying to bring all the stuff you learned in LA back to like your home. Yeah, of course.
See, like that, you cringe. But if that character was an 18-year-old, and I'd be like, oh yeah, that's what 18-year-olds say.
Yeah, I think that one thing I really loved is that I think I liked the second half more than the first half.
Sure.
Because the first half is pretty brutal. Like, it is scary. You know what I mean?
It's like edge of your seat in a bad way.
Yeah. And then it kind of cools off. And then it's just like, this is this guy going through high school.
Well, I think it's like they all grow up. Like, I think both Mason's parents.
There's a moment with the mom that I want to, when he's going to college, that I think that we should make a direct comparison with Ladybird. But
for sure that.
Do you think the point, continue your point?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that I think like literally everyone grows this movie. I mean, the dad in the beginning is a deadbeat dad. Yeah. You only see him every once in a while when he resurfaces in Yellowstone.
Becomes an insurance salesman and settles down.
And I think you even see that with the mom when she's talking to one of like her boyfriends or whatever, and she's like, I'm a parent. Like, I didn't have time to like
do all this shit.
Live my 20s like how I would have if I wasn't a mother.
Yeah.
And obviously you have a completely different level of expectations of yourself when you do become a mom, especially at a parents at a young age. And I think you see how they both deal with that in completely different ways.
Yeah, totally.
And I think I do feel bad for his mom, because it really just feels like Ethan Hawke was like, peace out, see you later.
Well, but this is also something that's later in the movie, and we can, after this, jump into the plot. But like, there's a moment where he's graduating, the Mason, and the mom and dad, Ethan Hawke, and what's her name?
Patricia Arquette.
Yeah, Patricia.
Olivia is her name in the
film.
Yeah.
So Olivia and Ratman are there in the kitchen, and he's like, "Wow, it's crazy," and like, you know, I would love to help out with like the costs of this party, and she's like, yeah, okay, how much would you like to chip in? And he like opens his wallet and it's empty, and he's like, oh, sorry. So he's like still a deadbeat, but in a different way. At least it's crazy.
He's definitely not a role model dad.
Yeah, no.
But also, I think I need to go to bat for Mason Sr. now, because the most important thing here is that It's Ethan Hawke. He's played by Ethan Hawke. So I think
Who does do an incredible
yeah,
job.
I think I love him a lot because it's Ethan Hawke. But he's also like, yeah, he's a bad dad.
I think there's no bad. I mean, there are bad parents. Actually, excuse me on that. I think one of the scenes that will help your argument, Patrick, is when they go camping together.
Yes, there's just a lot. He's a good person, and he's trying to be a good person for his son in the times that he's with them. But it's clear that that's not his priority at this time in his life. And it's also that tragic thing of he becomes a father.
Yeah,
a
wrong
good father.
place, wrong time.
He remarries and has another child with his new wife, and then becomes a minivan dad.
Yeah, there's a moment too where he's sort of like I'm gonna like do it right this time.
Yeah,
and that's like, how devastating is that?
Right.
You know,
it's a tough thing to hear. It's a tough thing to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, but okay, we can talk. I think basic kind of plot is they have the parents are separated.
Not in the best relationship.
Yeah,
between the two of
like
them.
the first time we see him in the beginning, she's in a relationship with some other guy.
Yeah,
but like Ethan Hawke comes in and like picks up the kids or whatever and brings them home, and she's like, "Did you take them to eat? Do they have their homework done?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "No, I was just hanging out with him." And then she basically just like runs him off of the property because she's so mad at him. So that's like kind of where we start.
yeah.
And I think that's even less about like getting the homework done and doing the whatever, and more about like, this is what I've been doing every day.
Right.
This is what
like,
I
where
have
the fuck
to,
have you been?
I have to be like the quote like bad cop to make sure that they have the skills to get on with life.
And he keeps trying to pretend like he's the good cop, as he keeps being like, well, if your mom lets me be in your life, I will, and stuff like that. And it's like, fuck you, dude.
There's definitely some like manipulation that I think he kind of grows out of it a little bit. I don't think he ever fully grows out of it.
No.
But I think he does mature a little bit, and you just see less of it as time goes on, especially with his like new wife at the end. But yeah, they don't have the best dynamic throughout pretty much the whole movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the closest, we get to a resolution is at the end, and it's like kind of undercut by the punchline of the empty wallet. I do think the one thing I forgot about this movie is how funny it is.
It's funny.
It's
again.
a comedy. Like, I mean, it's not a comedy, but like we were laughing throughout.
Yeah.
And some of it is just the nostalgia recognition of them playing Halo or the 20
Split
questions
screen
thing.
Yeah.
But like, it's a funny movie, and it makes sense. He's a comedy director, like School of Rock, and a lot of
School
his
of
other,
Rock is a great, one of the better comedies of the 2000s.
Yeah.
Like, it holds up, man.
But I think, the basic kind of trajectory is like his mom is trying to go back to school. She eventually becomes a professor throughout the movie. And then, Mason is just, kind of navigating growing up as a boy. And they're mostly in like suburban Texas for most of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And they start pretty poor, I would say. And there's the beginning, they have sort of like a father figure in their life who starts becoming abusive, and the mom's like, we're out of here. She, like you said, goes back to school, where she then meets another professor, or a professor kind of starts hitting on her.
Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah. And then they get married, and he turns out to be also an alcoholic and abusive. And we can definitely touch on some of these points, but it's sort of like, so that's in my memory, like the biggest plot points of the first half. And then the second half is more just like growing up bits. Is that what you guys remember?
Yeah, she gets a professor job. So they're in a college town. She ends up then dating and marrying one of her students who's a veteran.
Who also has some issues.
Yeah, it's clear that he has like PTSD and possibly a drinking problem, but isn't physically abusive with any of them, but doesn't, that has conflict with Mason.
Yeah. He also, but there is a moment where he just disappears. So like she throws him out because of something he did with Mason, but I forget what it was.
Yeah, I can't remember. I mean, that's part of the thing of the movie, that it plays really well as a series of memories.
Yes.
Because you see important things that happen, but you don't see everything.
I really like that framing. I never thought of it like that, but it is very much like which parts of your childhood are kind of seared into your brain.
That's
And
so
that,
real.
And that also goes back to why it's like there's such an attention to the time and the place and the nostalgia of it, because that is also stuff that's seared in your brain.
Yes.
Like I have
Yes.
very clear memories of like being in a basement, like a finished basement with my friends playing Halo or whatever.
Yeah.
And
Going
like,
to the
that is-
midnight Harry Potter release.
Yeah,
Oh
and
my
both of
God.
these things are in the movie.
Right. And that you get that recognition, and it works really well. I think I don't know if I talk about it now or save it for then, but just watching this movie and the like nostalgia of it like made me think about nostalgia in general, because I kind of like I've started to like kind of like bristle at things that are like overly nostalgic.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of pop culture is overly nostalgic.
Yeah.
Like both like mass culture of like movies.
Like we want to go back.
Yeah, just like big blockbuster like obsession with sequels,
Mhm.
sequelizing and prequelizing everything, and like just like endless references in movies. And then even to the point of like social media being on like TikTok and Instagram, there are people whose entire thing as an influencer is just to post something and say like, remember when.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's kind of the same like dopamine hit you get from watching this movie, but I think it like serves a purpose in this movie.
And to kind of one up on that, because I think that you're right, like absolutely.
Agree.
The thing I liked about this movie is it isn't like, oh, do you remember this? Oh, remember how cool it
Yeah.
was
Yes.
then? It was just like this was what it was.
Watch this woman get abused while there's a Nintendo game playing in the background.
Yeah, but it's not patronizing to
Yeah.
you, and it's not like weaponized. I feel like a lot of it's like weaponized as a way to just get you to like buy something or like see a movie
Yeah.
or
Sure.
something. You're like, this character is going to be back. Don't you want to see it? Versus, and then so it's like, yeah, this has a purpose in the to tell a certain story.
Yeah. And one part, so we kind of blew through some of the things we're talking about, lots of different parts of the plot. I would say that the plot in this movie doesn't actually matter as much. It's not like this leads directly into this. There are just, like you said, these moments that are very like very clear memories of a childhood. One of them that I want to talk about, because I think it was one of the ones that stuck with me the most, is in the second abusive dad situation, the professor. He like slowly becomes abusive, and he starts with the mom and then starts like going after the kids, and he has 2 kids. And there's a moment where they're like basically leaving, and Mason's like, what about the others? Like, what about his kids, essentially? And she's like, I don't fucking care. Like, we got to get the fuck out. My responsibility is you two.
Well, yeah, I mean, she
cares.
She cares.
Say that. Like,
she's
calls
basically
services
like,
and
I
everything.
legally I can't do. They're not my
Yes.
kids.
Yeah.
I can't do anything about this, and also like I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I can only handle.
Yeah.
I can barely even handle.
But she's still in school. She's literally relying on him.
I mean, she's literally unhoused in this scene. Like
Yeah.
she was
She's-
living with
staying with her
him, and she
friend.
was staying with an
not-
amazing friend who comes back later in the movie too, when
And
Mason
yeah,
graduates at
and-
that party. Which I was like, thank you for being
Yeah.
a lifelong friend. Because
but the thing is that at that moment, she's not even like a really close friend, because if you think about how they're interacting with each other, she's like, listen, I'm like so sorry about this, and she's like, no, you know what, anything you need, stay for. It'll be like a slumber party, right, to her daughter.
Yeah.
But like she's not, because they moved recently to there, so it's not like she's known this person forever.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right,
This is
right.
like a fairly recent acquaintance, and she goes out of her way to help this woman, Mason's mom, and it becomes, like you said, it's like a really interesting, rewarding thing later on.
yes, I think it's an amazing showing of like women supporting each other. And like you said, even if you're not close, like just being there for someone going through that, like I would be friends with that person for the rest of my life as well.
Yeah.
Like there's a certain debt almost that
Yeah.
you have towards someone like that.
That you can't really repay. You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah.
like, you did me such a solid. like,
Yeah.
like, oh my
I mean,
God.
you literally saved my life. Like
Yeah.
it was getting to the point with the abuse when like you cut to a scene when she's laying in the garage. Like those are the moments before someone gets murdered that they say like, I wish like we knew something was going on and why didn't we do anything, you know? So I think she literally saved her life.
There's a scene that is harrowing in the beginning where so it's I don't think you ever see it, but you see her laying on the floor in the garage, like you said, Jamie. And it is revealed later that he has essentially thrown her into the wall and like smashed her head into like the concrete, and she fell down and she's like bleeding and bruised. Then it kind of cuts to them all at the kitchen table later. And it's silent, and he just comes in, sits down with a bottle of whiskey, and he pours himself like into a pint glass.
Vodka, actually.
Is it vodka? It may have been a clear liquid. I forget.
It was vodka because I remember in the laundry room when he was he went from hiding it to being so open about it.
It's a clear liquor for sure. And he pours it in, and it kind of splashes around. He goes, "Anyone have a problem with me having a drink with my dinner?" And he's looking directly at her and is like, "I didn't think so." And he drinks it, and then like, oh man, just
throws the glass.
Yeah,
throws the glass, throws his meal while everyone's sitting there. It's a very, very tense scene.
Yeah, it's nuts, and that's why he also shaves Mason's head, which is the part that you were talking about.
I hate that.
He shaves his head because he's like, your hair is like all fucking long, blah, 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 and it's all about control.
Like, what are you, a girl?
Yeah, because Mason is sort of more effeminate and all that kind of thing. There's also a really interesting thing throughout this movie that is sort of the goodbyes. Like at the very beginning in the first scene when they're moving out of their original house to go back so that she can go back to school, you see his like friend riding after him on a bike and like waving, but like he is looking through a hedge out of a car and like can only kind of see his friends like trying to get to him. And there's like a ton of those throughout the movie, which is just them moving all around Texas, like kind of out of these bad situations. And then we start finally getting a little bit of stability in the second half.
Yeah, but yeah, no, the goodbyes too is I like that you bring that up, because that's just like part of life. Is there are people that are in your life for a period of time, and then you don't. I remember like younger and even till today, like always having a really hard time with saying goodbye to, especially friends that you know that you're not gonna see again, whether it's like someone you met at camp or like through like a summer job or something.
Yeah,
and like dealing with
when your friends move to Boston and you're still in North Carolina and you say bye to them and you're crying in your driveway.
And like, but yeah, just that. Not
for the listener, that's a Patrick and I story.
But it's got a happy ending.
Yeah,
but yeah, just not being able to really like deal with that and express it. But yeah, I think the second half kind of gets into more of him more growing into like a teenager, like going through puberty, having
and like finding an identity,
having romantic relationships.
That was so interesting to me. I really liked that one, where it's like you see him and the person who's his girlfriend, like Sheena, and they're like happy. They go on this college trip together. They visit his sister. There's like a lot of kind of silly, kind of smiley things that happen.
When they are sleeping together and a roommate.
And the roommate walks in and is like, I was not told that you would be here.
That feels so college to me too, to like not tell your roommate that like your brother and his girlfriend are sleeping in her bed. So crazy.
And she's like, I'm going to go down to the mess hall and get some coffee, and then I'll be back in like 20 minutes. Very clearly being like, get the fuck out of my room.
Which is totally valid. I would have been so annoyed.
So good. But like one of the things is that I really love about it is then in the next scene, it's like the next year and she's already gone to college, and you see, or not gone to college, but like it's the end of the year and she has had like dated a guy in college and basically has broken up with Mason so that she can be with this college guy, and just like how that is, how that happens and how people interact with each other when you're still.
She did the turkey drop.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think part of it, like what they choose to show and not show too, is really interesting in that too. Because again, you don't get the losing the virginity scene in this. Yeah. And there's probably a lot of reasons why, but
I'm so thankful for that, honestly.
It wouldn't make sense in this movie. And also like maybe it wasn't that memorable. And like the more memorable times are like this college trip you go on, like to visit your sister and like actually see what life is like as like a quote unquote adult.
And that's such a great moment, or a great point you bring up too, Patrick, in that there are moments that are shown that feel more meaningful than like a first sexual encounter or whatever, like when they're standing on that roof in the early morning because they've been out all night in like Austin, and he's like hugging her and then they share a kiss. Like that feels more special to me than, seeing them fumble through a first time or whatever. Like it just was like a nice moment. And then like he gets into photography and then gets pretty good at it. He's like second in the state or a silver medalist or something. And
Yeah, I think he gets a scholarship through that. But yeah, I think in the second half you get some more of these sweet moments between him and his girlfriend, between him and his dad. We talked about the camping trip.
That's a great scene
Meeting
too.
his dad's wife's parents.
Meeting his dad's wife's parents, which is fun.
Getting the shotgun.
Yeah, it's
crazy.
They're very religious, live out in rural Texas, and
They're like, "You're 16, boy, right? Here's your first rifle."
But I think it also is like a perfect parallel when they're like walking by like the pond or whatever, and Mason's taking photos, and he skips the rock, and Mason's like, or Samantha, I forget, or like, Dad, like, is this like, are you religious now or whatever? And he's like,
Yeah, he's like, no, the fucking no way. And then like they hear him or whatever.
yeah, or he's like, my wife is like, kind of vibes of like, she is, and I'll,
I'm dealing with it. Yeah,
exactly, which I feel like was kind of nice and needed in that scene of just like, they can't completely shift this character to be like
I was worried that they were going to try because they did the scene where that he's like fully in church sitting next to his wife and like all that kind of stuff.
I think he's always going to be a little bit of a slime ball.
Yeah.
I think he just craves stability, and they have offered him no caveats, no strings attached stability.
Unconditional love in a way.
Yeah. And I think, I keep sticking up for Mason Sr. He's problematic in ways. I think he's the dad that he wants to be friends, and he wants his kids to be good people and like cool. Like I feel like there are multiple scenes
Definitely
where
cool.
and maybe because we have the same taste in music, that's why I feel
Oh my God.
He plays Wilco for them, and I was like, he's right, that is a good album.
But the other thing that I let me soften on Mason Sr. I think that Mason Sr.
is my favorite character.
No, I think that he is a good dad. He's just an absentee dad.
Yes.
Like
absolutely.
we see these moments, and again, going back to I think now you've reframed this whole movie for me with the idea that these are just the memories that Mason remembers from his childhood kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like that changes everything, because there are probably so many things in between of him like wanting to see his dad or a hard moment that would have been helped with his dad being around. But instead what he remembers are the really like meaningful moments between them. And I think that that's like a good call there.
Yes, I totally agree with both of you. I think, no, but I feel like even like younger, when we see Mason Sr. with like Mason and Samantha, like I think he, no matter what point, has a great time with the kids when he's with them.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great scene. I forget what year it happens, when they're in the car talking and he's like, how are you doing? And there's like, good. And he like stops the car and he's like, I genuinely want to hear what you're doing on today. I want to hear about how you painted this and it was abstract and you didn't like it, but your teacher did, and blah, blah. Like, I loved that scene because I remember as a kid all the time being like, I'm fine, nothing happened today at school. And it's like, as older now, I'm like, I do want to hear what my kids do, and I think he genuinely cares. And even just like, as I said earlier, like the camping scene with Mason when he was like talking about Star Wars and talking about girls and talking about life and having fun too. Like, it's not always about the conversations they have, it's the things they do, like when they jump in after like getting down to like their boxers and they jump in. And it just seems like playful and fun and like a good memory.
And one thing I wanted to touch on, it's maybe the thing that stuck with me the most out of this movie, is the scene where Mason is going to college and he's packing everything up, and then he kind of like walks out into, because his mom sells his childhood home. They downsize several times after his sister goes to college, and she then gets an apartment just for herself. And then he like is
she gives him a box.
Yeah, she gives him a box. He packs it. He starts walking out with it. And then she's just like, is that fucking it? Like all of this time, and this is the end of that? And then she just starts crying.
Yeah.
Because it's like she has worked her ass off for 20 years to like get these people to this point, and then they're just gone.
Yeah.
And what is she left with? You know what I mean? And she's gone through so much. I thought that was the most interesting moment in the entire movie. I just wanted to bring it up because I
It's
love
the
that
Oscar
scene.
speech too.
I totally think that that's also like the parallel of like when they were at the graduation party and Olivia and Mason Sr. were talking about like, you're doing this all over again. Like that's crazy. And she's not. Like she's obviously done having kids.
Yeah.
And I think like it's also that of like, you know, the person that you can like relate to on this the most is like your partner. And like obviously they're divorced and she's not married at this point in the movie. And I think not even being able to like have like that conversation with like Mason Sr. of just like, wow, we did it, now we're done, now what?
Yeah.
I think that's also really tough.
Yeah, she doesn't
Absolutely.
doesn't have a support system either, you know.
Because he didn't. He's saying he's doing it again, but he's not. He's doing it for the first time, really, because he didn't.
Truly.
He didn't raise it. Yeah, and so she doesn't have. She doesn't have that person to relate to it with. Yeah, which I think speaks to her having that needing to have that emotional catharsis with Mason because she's done this on her own.
Yeah, and there's also, can I just say, the cinematography of this movie is really beautiful, especially when he's going to college and you're just seeing kind of like the shots of Texas. I was like, that looks like another planet. That looks fucking cool. I've never been to Texas and it made me want to go.
Texas is cool.
Yeah, and I would say also too, like, I enjoyed watching this movie the same way I enjoy watching like Forrest Gump, if that makes sense. In fact, I would say that this movie and Forrest Gump have a lot in common structurally, where it's sort of like moment to moment with like the middle bits dropped out, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so you're just kind of like, and then this happens.
We watched
and then
Tom
this
Hanks
happens.
over 12 years.
I did. Yeah, I could see that. I think this is better than Forrest Gump.
Oh,
but
for sure.
Yeah, I see the argument there.
I think a movie that I've invoked multiple times in this podcast that it reminds me of, or I draw parallels to, is After Sun, which After Sun takes place over a much shorter period of time, but that's a movie that you're watching that feels like a series of memories.
Yeah.
Like these are specific. These scenes we're watching this because this is what this person remembers.
Yeah.
But then that has a real gut punch at the end.
Yeah.
But I'll say. Or sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think it's interesting to also compare the like happy. Obviously, both these movies deal with abuse, in different manifestations. But I think with movies that tackle that, there does have to be some like levity, and I think the scenes in both movies that provide that, like for example, I didn't bring it up with Ladybird, but when her and her mom, after her and Kyle have the sex debacle, and she's crying in the car to her mom and they go look at houses in Sacramento, like that whole montage of them looking at houses in Sacramento like lives in my head rent free. And it grounds their relationship in a way when there's so much fight. They fight I think they fight more than they get along in this movie.
Yeah.
But you need those scenes, and it wasn't even like that scene was full of dialogue. And I think that can even be said for Boyhood, where there's some of the best scenes are like not dialogue heavy. They're just like moments when someone shows up for someone.
Yeah.
And I think that's what family is all about. And that's like obviously a central focus of like a coming of age movie, is like, how am I dealing with it? How is my family supporting or not supporting me? Absolutely.
So we have talked through both of these movies. I'm going to be honest, Patrick, with your little insight into like what this is just you are essentially Mason and you are remembering these moments. Like that has recontextualized this whole movie. I like it a lot more now because of that sort of recontextualization.
Patrick, good job over there.
However, why don't we go into talking about who wins the coming of age story title in Movie versus Movie? We have Ladybird, which obviously we're very effusive over, and Boyhood, which we've also talked about liking quite a bit. Both of these are great movies. I think I, in my mind, have something in mind for which one I think is better. Jamie, I know is
Pop off, Nick. I want to hear what you think.
Yeah, I think you. I want to hear yours.
Yeah.
You start us off.
So here's the thing. I think that Boyhood suffers from a little bit of like ego, I guess, in the terms of the filmmakers, where I think that it doesn't need to be that long. There are full scenes that I think you could have taken out.
Sure.
It could have been tighter. It could have been more focused. And I wasn't a huge fan of the ending scene of that guy like howling into the mountains, even though I understand that is like the right scene to put there at the end.
mushrooms, man.
Yeah, they're man.
And that's the guy who's your roommate in college.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, this guy's so cool.
This
And then
guy's fucking rad.
2 years later,
Also,
you're like,
he totally lucked out with a cool roommate.
Yeah,
He did.
for sure. He
But
like
also a couple of years, in a year or two, you're like, he's kind of,
He does a lot
doesn't
of
really clean
drugs.
up after himself. He does
It's
a lot
the
of
guy
drugs.
that you see on campus and you're still nice to and you say hi, but you
You're
don't
like,
hang out
"Oh,
with.
hey."
Yeah.
Anyways, continue.
So I think for me, I have to go with Ladybird because it is such a tight, like it is a
You like 'em
diamond. Gross. It is like a little diamond. It's like
I'm never getting invited back to the podcast. All right, continue.
it is the Greta's thesis compressed into something that is like so sturdy and so unassailable from like watching through it. It's just like, wow, this is so focused. Like you said, Patrick, it's 90 minutes, but I feel like I got so much out of it. I have a lot of issues with my family when it comes to communication and things like that. And it definitely tracks. I was like, wow, that was very close to home. So it still had like the heft. Boyhood, I would say like, for me, it is still a great movie. I really enjoyed it. It's funny. Like there were moments in Boyhood that I didn't get in Lady Bird where I was like, holy shit, that is exactly what I remember. Like I remember that exactly.
So do you feel like you on a personal level relate to Boyhood more than Ladybird?
I think, yes, of course, because I also grew up as like a little boy in a
Hashtag
rural
boy.
area. Yeah. And so like, I think that for me, Boyhood had the advantage of just being similar to my demographic in that way. However, I think that Boyhood is maybe more widely like palatable in that I think that you watch Boyhood and across like everywhere, you'd be like, Alice and I were talking about this, that on Letterboxd, I would be surprised if anybody really is like, this is 1 star, blah, shit, whatever. Like, it feels very much like a 3.5 star movie to me that I feel very comfortable with it there. I really enjoyed it. And I think that it should be like preserved as like a moment in time, a time capsule. However, when it comes to a full experience, I really loved what Lady Bird brought. And I think that one probably is my pick. But what about you, Patrick?
I honestly, a lot of what you said was very in line with my thinking on this. Although I think in general, I rate both. Well, I don't know where exactly. I think
Remember,
in general,
we have
I
different
rate
scales too.
This is true, but I think in general, I
all
rate
the way from 0
This
all
is
the way to
fair.
5.
This is fair. I tend to hang out in the top end, but I rate both of these movies very highly. In like within 2010s cinema, especially coming of age movies, I'd say these are probably the top 2. I would think in the 2010s.
And they also hold up perfectly still. You know what I mean?
they really do.
Yeah.
In a great way.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
I was kind of scared going back to like Boyhood because and Lady Bird, both of them are in the like 2015 area, and I've been rewatching a lot of fucking films from around that area, and 90% of them are dog shit, terrible. You can't go back.
Boyhood is so good because it just feels extremely honest. It's impressive too that this was a fully grown man was able to write kids of that era super honestly, because Boyhood leans into the like really cringy parts of it. The scene where he's hanging out with the older kids in that abandoned house is so cringy, but it's so accurate to the like expectations of masculinity.
Yes, and like someone's had sex with like a prostitute
and you lie,
or like a sex worker.
and you just lie about stuff to seem cool and pretend you know what like these words are. So it's same as Nick. I found like Boyhood is so deeply relatable. I find Lady Bird relatable too, but obviously not to the same degree. But I think I agree that like Lady Bird is so tightly crafted, and I love I really like slice of life movies, but in terms of just like as like a whole object, Lady Bird is so, I think to be Lady Bird's a perfect movie, or at least like as close as you can get in the last 10 years or so. So I rate Lady Bird very highly. I also rate Boyhood very highly. But I think kind of the length makes it tougher in not just having that tight
Momentum.
Yeah, I think drops it a little bit below Lady Bird.
Yeah. There are several times in this movie, because we watched it all together at Jamie's house. Thank you for hosting. And we like would stop because someone had to like go get a drink or go to the bathroom or something. And we would be like, holy shit, there's still a huge chunk of this movie left. And that happened like 3 times.
It did. But it also just kind of like, I think it does kind of wash over you because you kind of get this momentum that stays pretty steady, the time change. I'll say Lady Bird, I basically have, I can't find a single complaint about Lady Bird. Boyhood,
Because there is none.
Yeah, because there is none. Boyhood, I bristle a little bit at the scene at the end with the guy who's working on the house who comes back and is like, I went to school because he told
At
me
the
to."
restaurant when he's the
that felt
manager.
very white savory.
It's a little white savory. I think it serves a narrative purpose. It just feels contrived, especially for how the rest of that movie is plotted.
Yeah.
Agree.
It feels kind of hard to believe, but I think it serves a narrative purpose to like be like, look, your mom is like important. And she's doing good things for other people and for the kids to like recognize that. But you see that and you're like, ooh, you're like, he knew what he's an adult. He knew what school was before he told.
Yeah,
It wasn't like he was like,
he didn't need some
"School?"
random woman's like, oh, you're pretty smart, you should go to school. Like that's not what drives you back to school,
But-
you know?
Always listen to white women. That's what I always say.
But also, anyways. But yeah, so I vote Lady Bird.
And Jamie, I want to give you the last say. Just
Thank
fucking go
you.
off, King.
I will. It's should not come as a surprise to you how much Lady Bird means to me. This movie was very formative to me in understanding and looking back at my childhood. I've seen this movie so many times that I can just play the audio in my car and I can picture the scenes in my head. So please know.
You're like that little kid with the Shrek where he was like, have you ever seen that? Where it was like a dad whose son had watched Shrek like 18 times in a row and would catch him like kind of like zoning out and he'd be like, are you watching Shrek in your head? And he's like, yes. And like, so
Me.
they had to
That's me.
They had to keep going like at night. They would go into his room and be like, stop watching Shrek. And he'd be like, okay.
Literally, that's me. There was like a full year period where I just listened to the audio of that movie when I would do it. It was a year when I drove a lot and I would just listen to the audio of that movie so much. And then I watched it and was like, wow, I forgot this scene because it's just
Listen to
music.
it, yeah.
But no, I do think Lady Bird's a perfect movie. I think everything you both said, I agree with completely. I will say that I love a long movie, so I think I don't mind that.
What a hot take.
Crazy that I would say that, someone that loves Dune Part 2. And yeah, I'm going to bring Dune in one more time before it ends. But I think this movie, also just growing up as a female, there's certain things that I can just relate to that she's like, and having a relationship as a teenage girl with her mother, who I love my mom and we get along great, but we're very, very different and we have different personalities and different priorities. And, sometimes we would clash or whatever, but so I understand the, I love you through it all.
Yeah.
And I think both these movies have a I love you through it all times with all of the parents involved.
Yeah. I also like that it's not very judgmental. Both of these movies are not judgmental about that. It's not condemning anyone except maybe the abusers in Boyhood. But even when they have issues, to your point, Mason Sr. is not condemned in the movie.
Yes.
The mom, even though she dates one of her students, is not condemned. Same within Lady Bird with the mom, who's just can seem very erratic and explosive. She's not condemned by the movie. I really like that as a neutral lens. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, these people are flawed because, in the case, they don't give context of why Mason's parents and what their upbringing was like. Obviously, we do get that context with Marion, and she clearly didn't have an easy childhood, and I think it's a testament to people trying their best. And I think, although very flawed sometimes with in practice with Marion, I think all parents involved in both movies actually are well intended.
Yeah.
And I think that's what growing up is parents having their best intentions, and it not always going the way we thought or going right, or shit happens and we have to figure out what the next step is. And I think that's why I like slice of life movies so much, because I'm like, what would I do in that situation? Like, that's crazy. And like to overcome the things she's like for Mason's mom to go to college and like get a degree and then become a professor. That's incredible.
Yeah.
To be a single mom and do that.
That's crazy.
That's incredible. And like I said, that doesn't excuse other things that she's done. She's not perfect. No parent or child is perfect in this movie and either of these movies. But yeah, I think Lady Bird for me, because it's more relatable just because of the story. But yeah, I have a lot of deep respect for both these movies and how they tried to portray what it's like to grow up, especially in the time that like literally we grew up.
Yeah.
So
there you have it, everyone. We have crowned Lady Bird queen of growing up. Yeah, I think that both these movies are great. I rated one 3.5 stars and one 4 stars. So like obviously in my mind, pretty close, similar to what you were saying, Patrick. If you liked this episode of Movie versus Movie, give us a follow, subscribe to the podcast. You can also get in touch with us. In the show notes, you'll find all of our Letterboxd. You can also find our email and other social media stuff in there as well. We would love to hear from you. So go down, click on them, and come follow us. Also, leave a review like we said at the top. It really helps out the podcast, and we would love to hear from you. See you in a couple weeks for another episode of Culture Boys as we talk about what we're doing for the spooky month of October. All right, bye, everyone.
thanks for having me. Bye.
Movie versus movie. Movie versus movie. Movie versus movie.